So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of Cohasset, members of the Cohasset Planning Board and the staff, as well as the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Welcome to the December 1st, 2021 Zoom meeting of the Cohasset Planning Board. Roll call: Glassmeyer, Eric Potter, Paul Grady, Paul Caleri.
Paul Caleri here.
Tom Callahan. Excuse me, Clark Brewer.
Here.
Thank you. Lauren, will you please instruct the public regarding the meeting protocol?
Certainly. So for members of the public wishing to address the board for public comment, we have 3 public hearings on the agenda tonight following one discussion about something with our Master Plan Implementation Committee. For public comment for each of those items, if you could just inquire with the planning board via the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen. You input your name and address, and as well, if you want to just let us know which site you're referencing, that would be helpful for us. And then at the time, we can either take written comment, write it into the record through the question and answer, or we'll promote you to address the board. We do ask that you keep comments to a maximum of 3 minutes, and please try not to be repetitive. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lind. Our first item this evening is a discussion with the Master Plan Implementation Committee Chair, Ms. Katie Dugan, on an update on the Comprehensive Zoning Rewrite RFQ process. Ms. Dugan, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm going to share my screen quickly. All right. So I really just wanted to come and give a really quick update and a follow-on to the joint meeting that we had on November 9th between the Planning Board, the Select Board, Master Plan, ZBA, and your board regarding the Comprehensive Zoning Rewrite. We had promised that the next step was going to be your board's involvement in the RFP process. The zoning bylaw working group met in November, so I just wanted to quickly update you on what we discussed at that meeting as it relates to the comprehensive zoning rewrite, and then specific next steps in terms of the RFP, because there are some things that we'd like to get done in December, including coming back to your board on the 15th for some specific comment and feedback on that process. So tonight is really just a quick overview of what's coming, so that you guys are aware, and just a chance to answer any questions before we sort of move into the RFP process. So as you know from that November 9th meeting, there was some really great, I think, agreement amongst all of the joint boards that it was time to undertake a comprehensive zoning reorganization and redraft. And so based on that feedback, we are headed to special town meeting for a portion of the funding in order to hire a consultant. The first step in that process after getting funding at special town meeting would be doing a RFP under the 30B process, which takes a little bit of time, but hopefully will allow us to attract a good group of consultants that can address some of the needs and scope of services that we define in our process. So just wanted to quickly run you guys through 2 slides based on what the zoning bylaw working group discussed in November. So one of the things that we did as a follow-up to the meeting on the 9th was just do a little bit of benchmarking around what other communities have done when they go through the process of doing a comprehensive zoning rewrite. And so we actually surveyed quickly 10 communities that have undertaken this type of rewrite in the last decade. And it ranged from neighbors like Scituate and Duxbury. Actually, Jen Oram worked on the Scituate zoning rewrite. So we have an in-house expert. And then we looked at some other smaller communities on the North Shore, like Newburyport, Manchester by the Sea, and Rockport, which seems to be a community that keeps on coming up in some of our zoning work, and then some others around the state. And I'm happy to share the full benchmarking, but just kind of highlight what the summary was. You know, the committees that worked on this type of zoning rewrites were in the range of what we have now on the zoning bylaw working groups. So they range in size from 5 to 12 members, and they were similar in composition in terms of having representatives from various permitting boards and the town planning side. Many of the communities in the sample that we looked at undertook this kind of work following a master plan. In addition, there were some cases where it had just been a long time since the last comprehensive redraft. So there were sort of two scenarios under which communities were generally undertaking this kind of project. It was common in the communities that we looked at to phase the rewrite process. There was a lot of references to phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of their process. Generally, the phases, based on what we could see, was around 18 to 24 months per phase. And what the phasing was really depended on the scope of work. So there wasn't really necessarily any learnings that we would take from that, but just a recognition that it was often the preferred approach to do it in a phased approach instead of all at once. In terms of how the communities went about this, the vast majority of the towns actually utilize consultants. So I think we should feel good about the fact that we are headed down that path, and we've already got a funding request in front of special town meeting. There were a few cases in which the consultant that the communities chose to use was just legal counsel, but in the majority of cases, it was legal counsel plus an additional consultant who could help more broadly with the zoning rewrite process. I'll talk in a second about work product, and we didn't necessarily sample the work product saying this is what Cohasset needs, but just rather to understand how other communities have approached it. But in general, the work product included an upfront diagnostic report, some type of public forums and community engagement process, a drafting and public review process, and then a final report. And all of that happened prior to the planning board 40A public hearings and annual town meeting approval. So there's a lot of pre-work, obviously, that took place on a project of this size before it got to a public hearing. In terms of the sample work products, this is just a range of what we saw in the benchmarking. A lot of cases, there was a diagnostic report or a zoning audit done up front. In some of those communities, they hadn't had a zoning bylaw working group that had been at the helm like ours has been for a year. So they were sort of starting from ground zero. I think we are in a little bit of a different position there, but they did undertake sort of a zoning audit to begin the process. Then they moved on in many cases to some type of either neighborhood or specific zoning topic studies. Again, this is something that the zoning bylaw working group has already been working away at. In terms of other sample work products, almost every single one of them published a clear timeline to the community and had a web page and other mechanisms to communicate in terms of what the process was and a central location for the community to be able to engage and get updates from. In terms of other product that we saw that these projects entailed were community surveys or committee surveys. In some cases, there were written comment periods that were given. Every single one of them had some kind of either open house or public forums that were done in order to get community feedback. And then in the kind of final phase, prior to the 40A public hearings with the planning board, they generally issued a final report on the zoning recommendations, and they issued what was, a draft, revised table of uses or table of area dimensions, a draft set of zoning bylaws. And when they did that, they would have a clear red line against the existing bylaws. And then in preparation for annual town meeting, they generally had an executive summary of the changes so that for those that didn't want to go through 200 pages of red line, and then a final presentation in terms of annual town meeting. But this is kind of the scope of the work that could be included in a project of this magnitude. In terms of the specifics, in terms of the RFP process, Lauren already covered some of this when we met in November, but we've had a chance to meet with Michelle Leary and talk a little bit more in detail about the timeline and the next steps. And so this month, we're really focused on drafting that RFP that request for proposal that will be used to solicit bids from potential consultants. We plan on coming back to your board on Wednesday, December 15th with a full document, which we'll get to you in advance. We'll be looking for comments and input on that. We then intend to release that RFP as part of the 30B public process in January, and then proceed to interviews and selections of a consulting firm in February, with the hope that we would be able to start with a consultant on board by middle of March. And again, as we discussed at our November meeting, the target completion of this would be roughly 15 months later at annual town meeting in 2023. And then in terms of the next steps, just one thing that I wanted to highlight for your committee to think about, no need to sort of comment or sign up tonight, but as part of that RFP process, what happens is an interview committee is formed, and that interview committee are the individuals that are actually responsible for reviewing all of the bids that come in, and using a standardized matrix to evaluate the bids that come in based on qualifications. In this case, not price. And once the qualifications are reviewed, then generally 3 finalists are selected, and that same interview committee will go through and do interviews of all of the 3 finalists. And again, using kind of a predetermined matrices of qualifications, rank those 3 finalists and make a determination around who they believe is the best fit in terms of the scope and the needs of the consultant for the comprehensive zoning rewrite. So this is just a sample of what that interview committee could look like. And it's based on recommendation from Michelle Leary in procurement that of a interview committee anywhere from kind of 6 to 8 people is probably the max. Part of what happens is that in order to be on this interview committee, you have to be at each of the meetings. So you have to be able to commit to reviewing the proposals, making the meeting to select the finalists, and then be present for all 3 finalist interviews. We're going to try and make that a little bit easier by having all of the interviews done on one night so people won't have to manage multiple dates. But again, in order to participate in the interview committee, you have to commit upfront to all of the key dates, because in order to be able to vote in the end, you need to have attended all of that. So the at least draft for discussion is 3 town hall members, John Hallen, Lauren Lind, and Jen Oram. And then from a committee structure, 2 members from zoning bylaw working group, 2 members from planning board, and 1 member from the select board. Now, all of this is open for discussion, but I wanted to put it out here tonight in order to let your committee know that there is going to be this need to form an interview committee in order to review the RFPs and help in the selection process. So we would hope that somebody from planning would sign up to help with that. So I'm going to pause there. And I saw, Eric, you had your hand up a while ago, so I'll get to you first.
Yeah, I just had to step away at the beginning, so I figured out what we're doing now, but
Okay.
I was just going to insert. I was wondering, but I'm good. I figured that out.
Okay, good.
For presenting this, this seems to me to be a very logical way of going about things, which then makes me have to ask the question of, this seems to be the way of handling a zoning bylaw rewrite here.
Mhm.
And it's something that can be done without having to show your hand. The town doesn't show their hand, basically up to everybody what's going to be happening and what direction we're doing, and all the bylaws are going to be changed. It's known by all the citizens that there's going to be a zoning bylaw rewrite. So it begs the question of, with these bylaws going to this town meeting, why these particular, and you guys have spent the time, so I'm sure they have an answer for it. Why the ones that we picked, the zoning working bylaw committee picked to move forward? What was the thought process for selecting those specific issues? And do you still think, as you're looking at this more piecemeal or all at once, what, it's because for me, and I think I've intimated this before, an all at once process really allows you to avoid any loopholes or any ancillary things from slipping through the cracks, or starting a snowball effect by passing a few particular bylaws without really knowing what the grand scheme or the big picture.
Eric, you've just fallen off the line. but I think we've got your point. Katie Dugan, would you like to respond?
Sure. Eric, are you, just to be clear, are you questioning sort of the phased approach? Is that your
Okay.
question?
You're still having a hard time communicating, Eric. Can Katie go ahead and, Katie, I'd continue, please, Ms. Dugan.
Okay. Well, I guess to address Eric's question, I mean, the goal of this would be to be upfront with the community around exactly what the timeline is, and communicate that. And also communicate if we're going to do a phased approach in a phase 1 and a phase 2, what is going to be in phase 1 and what is going to be in phase 2. And part of the reason that many communities have chosen to do this phased, and by phase, I don't mean little bits, Eric. I mean, these are substantive phases. Like phase 1 is reorganization, all the definitions, and like pick 3 major topics: residential housing, housing options, like, and then phase 2 would be perhaps 2 more topics. But part of the reason that many of the communities have chosen a phased approach is that it just, if you don't, you can get into kind of a 3-year project or a 4-year
And
project.
I understand that, but I guess what's happening right now, does that fall into one of these phased parts of the project? Or is this an outlier, what's happening at town meeting now with these bylaws that are going to be voted on?
The way I would describe what's happened at annual town meeting and special town meeting is this fall is really a preamble to the bigger process. So I would describe what we've proposed for, or what we passed at annual town meeting, what we're proposing for special town meeting is a preamble. And the phase 1 is going to be substantive in a 15-month process, which addresses many major issues all in one batch. So it doesn't sort of break it up into small pieces and chunk away at it, but it rather tackles it in one big comprehensive phase. Because I think your point is that if we break it up into too many little pieces, people begin to wonder what's next and what am I missing? And so the thought process is like,
Yeah, and I'm just being playing devil's advocate here. So for instance, the preamble, you say it's a preamble, right? What's going on at town meeting now. So if people ask me, well, it's a preamble to what the actual process is going to be. Well, then the next logical question is, well, why that doesn't seem to go, that's not, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, but that doesn't seem to go with the structured process of how things typically do. These seem to be cherry-picked items. Are there motivations for having this preamble prior to starting the process in what would be a traditional manner?
Let me bring Mr. Callahan in for a minute here, Ms. Dugan.
That'd be great.
well, okay.
Oh, if you don't mind, Katie, I don't want to step on your toes, but you know, guys, I've looked at this bylaw all the way through. I have started a rewrite. It was written to do all at once. Now it's shifting to a phased approach, but there's a lot of things in the bylaw that are independent of one another and need change and updating, but don't necessarily they can go forward without necessarily thinking about the impact on another section. The definitions that we're doing in the fall town meeting were designed to be changes in definitions we need to do. And I'll just say the overall change in definition is going to be maybe some new terms or more modern terms, but a lot of it is getting rid of definitions that we have in the existing bylaw that nobody uses or we don't use anymore, moving definitions that are all over the bylaw in various articles back into one place. But in picking these, we pick things that also happen to have an immediate need and immediate impact on our work and the zoning board's work. Black Horse Lane is a recent example where we struggled to deal with the issues of adequacy of way, defining what a way is, what it is not. And that's why these were in particular picked out to go front, because they are going to have an immediate impact on our work. and help us, even if nothing else in the bylaw gets modified, even if we do absolutely defeat every article that comes after this. But I can tell you about the phases that we're looking at can all pass and fail on their own merit. And they can be improvements in organization of the bylaw. There's a lot of it is housekeeping related. The changes in definitions and putting them in one place will be helpful no matter what happens later on. I'll be very honest.
Wait a minute, Mr.
I'll be very honest with
I'm gonna
people.
have discussions moving forward, Amy, so.
No, let's be very honest. The biggest possible changes we will probably see is in the table of dimensional regulations, which haven't been addressed in 30 years. But
I have no, yeah,
I can tell you until we get to that step, that other changes that are going to be proposed will be beneficial and can pass whether or not we change the table of area regulations later, which is probably going to be the last phase.
right. So
So-
the reason why
All
I
right,
asked.
all right.
this
I
question-
want to draw this. I want to draw this to.
I'm gonna follow up with one more
point.
question. The reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, and I'm on board, I voted in favor of these things, but by picking these, the reasons why I'm being a little bit forward with this is because, you know, people that I talk to in my circles are saying, well, what's the point of the ledge? Is that immediately necessary? It sounds like that's an extension of a Tom Callahan bylaw that was proposed a year ago. Is there a subdivision that's going or potentially going in that we would like to protect against? I want to protect the integrity of the process because I think down the line, that's critical for the planning board and for the zoning working bylaw committee. And my concern is that, and I'm not saying I'm not in favor of what I voted for, but that is my concern talking amongst the people that I sometimes interact with. So I think it's important that you guys are aware of that as well, because we all, you know, interact with different people.
Yeah,
All right,
no,
so Tom,
that's
I want you to wait a minute because Katie wants to respond.
Sure.
And I don't want us to get into a debate here about this. We've already agreed to do what we're going to do. And this is really a discussion of how we're going to move forward on the other part of the revisions. Ms. Dugan?
Thank you. I feel like we've lost focus on what the point of tonight was, which was trying to move forward with hiring the consultant, which I think was critical path from the working group's perspective, because it would allow us to do that public engagement and that public communication piece that is going to address a lot of Mr. Potter's concerns in terms of making sure that everybody is on board and this is very visible. And so, you know, I understand your comments, Eric, but I think we litigated that during the public hearing process. And I hope we've addressed the concerns that what we brought forward ledge protection, because it was a request of the community when we had the land alteration in the spring. And we thought we were actually doing the work that the community requested us to do in the spring and bringing that forward at special town meeting in the fall. And the definitional work was really bringing stuff into line with statute and case law. In terms of the bigger process, that's what we've been trying to get to. And that's why I came here tonight, was to get your buy-in that we'd like to have your review of the RFQ on December 15th, and then have 2 of your members participate in the interview committee. And again, until we get to this consultant, you know, our ability to do that next bigger phase and engage is really hampered. And so that's why we've been working hard and pressing hard to get there. But we have to go through an RFP process, which is why I was here tonight.
All right, thank you. I'd like to ask Ms. Lynn to direct us as to how to draw this to a close and get an approval for moving forward with the RFP.
Sure. So this really is just an update. There's no action that the planning board needs to take. This is just intended to be a status update and let you know about the timeline and the process that's unfolding as a follow-up to the joint meeting that we had back with the select board on, I believe that was November 9th. So we will discuss later in the agenda sort of the upcoming meeting on the 15th, but the plan is to circulate an RFQ draft for all of you to comment on, as we had outlined at that joint meeting. And we would leave some time on the 15th to address sort of a group conversation about comments they may have as we move towards finishing this RFQ process. So that's really all. There's no action you need to take.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Dugan, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Kitty.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is a reopening of a public hearing for an application for a site plan review filed by Todd Amalang, Public Planning and Heating Company. The subject property is 808 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. Lauren, would you have any introductory comments?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to ask my colleague Jen to help me make sure that everyone here is promoted. I see our town council has joined us, and it's hard to multitask. So thank you. This is a continuation of a site plan review application for 808 CJC Highway. At the last time, there was a request from an attorney, Mr. Sini, on behalf of the residents that the board had heard from previously that had come in just before the meeting, and the board had wished to have some more time to review those items. The applicant at the time had stated that they weren't interested in submitting any new application. So as such, we don't have any new application material on behalf of the applicant to review. There was an additional letter submitted from Mr. Sini that was distributed to the board. We have now, at this point, I've prepared for the board a draft decision that I circulated actually just earlier today, so you can have a copy in front of you. But the plan would be, if the board was willing and interested in closing the hearing tonight and beginning to deliberate on a discussion, we have a draft document that we could walk through today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back just to make sure that the applicant has nothing new that they'd like to add, and then we can resume from there.
So, Mr. Amalang, do you have something you'd like to add this evening?
No, I'm all set. If Greg is all set, he can explain anything else, but I don't believe there's anything new that we have. But you let me know, Greg. He's pretty much running it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Morris, do you have anything further you'd like to say?
Thank you. For the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer representing the applicant. I really don't have anything new to add since our last meeting. We've made all of the requested changes of this board here. We've previously gotten the approval of the Conservation Commission. We've been through the peer review process. We've met with the fire chief. We've met with the building inspector. We comply on this project. This is a by right project in the highway business zoning district. It's a simple site plan review. This is not a special permit. We believe we comply with the requirements of section 12.6 to be issued a building permit. We'd like to close the public hearing and move forward with such.
All right, thank you for that. So at this point, we have a draft set of conditions report from Ms. Lind, and I'd like to ask the planning board members individually what they would prefer to do. Shall we go through this document and review it? I guess our first question is whether or not, Ms. Lind?
Sorry, just procedurally, I was wondering, are you looking to close the hearing? Because if so, we should take public comment one last time before you close.
Okay, I wanted to first get a gauge from the planning board members as to whether that's what they'd like to do.
Well,
Yes,
Wait a minute, was that a yes? Did somebody say yes?
I said yes.
All right, thank you. It would be helpful when you, thank you.
Let's move towards closing the public hearing by taking any final comments from the public.
All right. May I see anybody in dissent? No. So then let's move on to the public. We have one comment from the public.
Yes, we have one comment, and it's from Frederick Winsman, asking for attorney Chris Sini, representing 44 homes in the neighborhood, to speak. So I've promoted Mr. Sini at this time.
Right, let me say something. Thank you, Mr. Sini, for being here. But in all good interest to everyone, do you have new information to provide to us, or are you going to be restating the conversations that we have had so far?
Well, I'll be very brief. Thank you for recognizing me.
Excuse me, Mr. Sini, would you please answer my question?
I would like to comment on the new material I submitted.
The material that we received from you last time we were together, correct?
No, the material I submitted on November 23rd, which was a few days after the last meeting. It includes a legal memorandum and a revised set of proposed conditions.
All right, well, we've been, I think what you can do is focus specifically on just what the information is that's new and different, recognizing that we have all seen it and also that we have seen the previous materials.
Yes, I'll be very brief. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, my name is Christopher Senni. I'm a land use attorney, and I represent the residents who live in 44 homes on the residential streets that enter this neighborhood on Brewster Road. And in those homes, there are about 100 of your constituents who are very concerned about the condition of Brewster Road and the impacts this application has. We provided a lot of material. I think the process has been made easier because this group of residents has an attorney representing them. So the board has not had to hear from many individual residents. They've allowed me to speak on their behalf. Some legal questions were raised at the November 17th meeting. In particular, could this board condition approval of a site plan on some changes and improvements to Brewster Road, which is a private way? And I submitted a legal memorandum addressing that question to both the board and to the town attorney. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about that memorandum. The memorandum also addresses a question raised in one of our conditions, which is, can this board make a condition that the applicant would have to come back in or undertake further mitigation if the projections prove to be inaccurate and the impacts greater than what was projected? I'm referring to the traffic analysis that was submitted. And I answer that question by citing in my memorandum a case that came out of the Cohasset Planning Board in 2012 and went up to the appeals court, and the appeals court said, yes, that's fine. In that case, it was a wind turbine project. And that approval, which was both site plan approval and special permit, was conditioned on the applicant meeting the shadow flicker and the noise projections that the applicant had submitted. We're suggesting the same thing. We have backed away from our request that this board ask the applicant to make changes in Brewster Road today. We would like some changes to the drainage considered now, but we have, in the interest of trying to reach agreement with the applicant, we've said, well, we'll be okay with no widening of Brewster Road now, but that's if your traffic analysis proves to be accurate. If not, you should come back in and amend this site plan and take a look at providing that right turn lane. So we've tried to be accommodating. Unfortunately, this morning we learned that a discussion that we were having through the engineer on seeing if we could reach agreement on the conditions was halted, which was a disappointment to my clients. But you have our conditions, and I would just close by indicating that, you know, Mr. Morris just now said simple site plan review and that this is an allowed use. But your zoning bylaws give this board significant powers in site plan review to make sure that access from adjacent streets will be safe and convenient, and to condition the grant of a site plan approval appropriately. So it isn't as if you are in a position of having to grant site plan approval without conditions you feel are appropriate. We've offered some. I've been through those conditions one by one with the applicant's engineer. And again, I was disappointed this morning when a process was halted. But we appreciate the time. My clients mostly wanted to be heard. And because you have been very generous to me on their behalf, they have been heard. This rests with your board. We ask you to consider what we've proposed, and we're here to answer any questions. And again, we appreciate everything you've put into this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sini, and I would like to thank the neighbors for being diligent in working toward a resolution. And I appreciate the fact, and I know all the rest of the board members appreciate the fact, and also appreciate the concerns that you've raised. I'd like to ask Ms. Murray if she has any comments about what in particular, the item in terms of conditioning the prospect of coming back to the planning board for a revision of the site plan review should the analysis that has been presented somehow differ from what the consequences are.
Certainly, Madam Chair, thank you. So I just want to back up a little bit and just say that for the most part, I agree with Attorney Seni's legal opinion that he submitted to the board. I just want to reiterate a couple of things, and that is, as Greg Morse was saying, this is a use allowed by right. And even though it can be subject to site plan review, we can't use site plan review to prohibit the use, nor can we regulate it to such a point where we're effectively prohibiting the use. What we can do, however, is look to what the bylaw allows us to regulate and impose reasonable conditions. And one of the things that site plan review does give you permission to look at under paragraph B6 is vehicular and pedestrian access, traffic within the site and in relation to access streets to make sure that it's safe and convenient. So I do think that the board can impose reasonable conditions within that construct of your bylaw. In terms of a condition that would require an applicant to come back in the future should the projections turn out to be different, you certainly can require the applicant to come back in the future. I didn't quite like the way no disrespect to Attorney Seni, I didn't quite like the way he had drafted that particular condition about the dedicated right turn lane and coming back in the future. I thought it was a little too open-ended. So I talked with the planning director earlier today and then followed up by sort of reworking that condition that should the board decide that you want to impose this condition, you could require the applicant to come back in the future. But I think it hinges upon also requiring the applicant to submit an updated traffic assessment, because how are we to measure whether or not the actual traffic impact differs from what their traffic engineer is projecting to be the case? So it would have to link a future traffic report, and if it does generate more traffic than has been projected, that they would have to come back before the planning board for the board to decide what further action to take at that time, if any.
All right, Ms. Murray, are you suggesting that as part of our discussion this evening in terms of conditioning that we work with the language that was presented by Mr. Seni and have it be a part of our condition? Or are you just clarifying, being more specific about how that ought to work?
I'm just clarifying. I'm not taking a position one way or the other as to whether or not the board should or should not impose that condition. I just, I reworked it so that if the board was open to such a condition, I think it's more manageable. And that's what's presented in the draft decision.
All right, thank you very much for that. Ms. Linda, were you anticipating that we would handle, I'm asking a question of information before we close the hearing and we move forward. Ms. Lynn, do you anticipate that should we close the hearing at this moment, that we would actually be working on this document together, going through what you have provided us and making modifications to it with the intent of getting the language approximately what we expected it to be before we move further?
Yes, that's correct. The board, if they wish, could close the hearing now that there's no further information they wish to collect and there's no information being presented, and then we could move into deliberation. And I do have a draft decision that I can live edit.
All right, thank you. So I have a motion by Mr. Brewer to close the hearing and begin deliberations.
Second.
Do I have a?
No, I didn't
All right.
make a motion.
All right.
How
I
many-
just
used the
suggested-
term moved to say that that's what we should be,
All right.
what we should be doing. But
I'll
I
make the
just have,
motion that we close the hearing.
I just
Let's
have one more, before we close the public hearing, I just have one more point that I think is worth discussing. Between our last meeting on this and this one, the 75% 3A design was distributed. And it shows sidewalks going across the front of this building, and it shows the relationship of curb cuts and that are different than what is shown on the applicant's project. The main things that I think it might affect would be a pedestrian connection. Right now, there's no pedestrian connection from 3A, but where there is a sidewalk planned in the front and there's no pedestrian connection, it seems to me that now would be the time for the applicant to figure that out as a part of their project, as opposed to having no pedestrian connection when the sidewalk goes in, or propose a route, because I know that the 3A project is a few years off, as a part of this project planning. You know, where that was distributed a week or so ago. And the documents, it was page 27 of 239 pages for the 3A redesign.
Thank you, Mr.
But,
Brewer.
You know, I'm
Do you-
happy to talk about it amongst the board in terms of whether this would be a critical component to the safe and convenient pedestrian access in and out of the site. You know, for example, the right of way along Brewster could have a sidewalk that runs to the driveway of this facility, with a sidewalk that then turns into the front part of the building, where office space might be that people would need to access as pedestrians. But let's
All right.
keep it around.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer, for that comment. And let me turn to Mr. Callahan.
Make a motion, well, I'll just say briefly on Clark, I submitted a condition that I think deals with the interaction of this site with the state's highway design, because they have to get a curb cut permit in the future. But anyway, I will make a motion that we close the hearing.
Can I get a second on that?
I second it.
All right. Roll call, Mr. Potter,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Brewer.
Nay, because I think we should be talking about the sidewalk.
All right, thank you, Amy. Aye. So let's move on. I think we can work this, as Mr. Callahan indicated, Mr. Brewer, there has been an attempt to address this question. So hopefully the language will be accommodating of any kind of refinements that you think are necessary. With that, Ms. Lynn, would you like to get set up so we can start the drafting process?
Well,
Yes, let me just do a save as, so we have this as a different version. In a minute. All right, I'll share my screen with you now.
Can you make that a little bit bigger? I think everybody will be benefited from that.
All right, is that good?
That's good.
All right, so I'll walk you quickly through this decision, and then I'll sort of focus your attention on the pieces that you should focus on in your deliberation. This is the cover portion of the site plan review decision. It gives the sort of procedural information quickly in a summary and gives the vote as a cover letter to the decision. We then go into general information, sort of who is responsible as the applicant team, what the parcels are, what the proposal was as a summary. We walk through the record set of plans that were submitted first by the applicant, by our peer review, through our department board and committee comment distribution, as well as we list our public written comment for this application, since we did have a series of submissions. We then get into further detail on procedural history and background. That's sort of elaborating on the procedural history summary that was laid out on the first page, talking about things like the filing date, what dates this was continued to. And then here we get into section 3, findings. This is going to be the portion that the board is first going to want to really weigh in on. These are the findings that the board should be making pursuant to the parameters that are laid out under 12.6 of our zoning bylaw, site plan review. You'll see that the language here is sort of each bullet point that's called out in site plan review is listed, and then the finding that follows underneath. This language is a draft for your consideration. It's a recent site plan review decision, but it's in no way suggesting that you do have to, make these specific findings. So we'll discuss this in more detail in a moment. And then the last portion is the conditions of approval. I'll say that the first condition of approval is something that I input that's been sort of a standalone in a lot of our decisions. It really just suggests that the applicant will have to get any relief that they're deemed necessary. The next, in terms of other board and commissions, the next couple series are from one of our members, and then the final 2 of our conditions that are included in this list right here were suggestions from our council in response to the requests that we have gotten from the neighborhood. And then you'll see the last page of the decision is a signature page. So I'll zoom back up to findings and turn it back over to the board to begin deliberation. And that's all I have for you for now. So thank you. And I will do my best to live edit as you make amendments, but just remember that I need you to slow down because I don't type that fast.
All right, given that the majority of the board has not seen this, somebody needs to close their mic down. In light of the fact that the members of the board have not had a chance to read this yet, I would think, I will ask that we first take it in pieces, and we can see what is up on the screen right now. If everybody would please, if you can move it up a little bit further, Lauren, we can have 3 be there. No, move it up. Yeah, so that there, we have all the paragraphs that are there. And let's begin by reading that. So
Did you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can go ahead and read it.
Do you want me to read it out loud?
Oh, I thought people could just read it to themselves.
Okay, I'm just not sure what you wanted.
Yeah,
Sure.
no.
Perhaps you could ask if anybody has a question or a reservation about the findings, any of the findings.
Well, don't they, I would,
Is that-
Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to continue to bury ourselves in process and going back and forth. Let's just get to it. And I would rewrite the finding number 1. To the extent that the applicants presented some evidence on these points, I would just have it read as conditioned, comma, the project will not be harmful, injurious, objectionable to existing or future uses. Because we do have a condition about future uses if there's a significant change in future use. So it's just changing the beginning of that condition. I have no problem with condition number 2 or 3. Again, number 4, I would just say, again, no evidence was presented. Well, the applicants presented some, the abutters presented some evidence that, we can either agree or disagree with. I would say again, as conditioned, the project will not result in injury to downstream property owners or cause hazardous conditions. I'd make a note here to the abutters that, whatever the drainage problem is at corners pre-exists this development. It's not caused by this development. And I personally, I still have an issue about whether we can compel an owner to do work, be it drainage work in a catch basin or making a right turn lane on a road that it doesn't necessarily own. But anyway, that's my suggestion there. I can't see 5s, but yeah. And I'll agree that, as for number 6, I think when you look at forward to the rest of the conditions, we're going forward here tonight towards approval. But again, I might somewhere work in the word as conditioned. based on the plans, documents, testimony, and as conditioned. And
Where
then
would you like? Which
right after testimony, comma, and as conditioned, comma, and then I think the rest of it is fine. That's just my suggestion, guys. And then, well, now I'm looking at the second paragraph. The board encourages, I would say, assuming we accept condition number 5 or a variation thereof, I would reword that as the board will require the applicant to coordinate.
I agree with that.
You know, some of Clark's points about the sidewalk can be worked into condition number 5, but that's already anticipating that they have some more work to do with the highway department. So,
All right.
you know, unless anybody else has other changes, I think that's fine.
Mr. Grady?
I'm wondering where we could put Mr. Senni's condition as approved, as amended by Ms. Murray.
We haven't gotten to conditions yet.
That's conditions 6 and 7 further down, the conditions of approval.
Right.
As I understand it, Carolyn was basing that off Attorney Senni's suggestion.
That he will come back and revisit it. I must have misread it. That.
No, it's not. You haven't seen it yet, Paul. It's
Oh,
below.
I'm sorry. I thought that
Okay.
when Tom said 6. All right, my mistake.
All
Now,
right.
I don't know if we need to make any additional finding here regarding the landscaping at the property boundary. I don't know where that's covered. If you could roll up again, Lauren. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That finding number 4 would deal with that, and the as condition, you know, we'll deal with that. I think we do need to add a condition about just ensuring that the screening that's proposed for the property line with the abutters is addressed.
So that would be a new condition?
Probably, yeah. When we get to the conditions, let's figure out where to work that in.
Are we ready to move on to conditions?
Unless anybody has anything else.
I believe we are.
All right.
I think Lauren's standard condition 1 is, you know, that's going to be a standard thing for all of our permits, so that's fine. Now in number 2, that's something that I proposed, and that was intended to address that, you know, what we have proposed here is an allowed use. It's a use that's going to be, you know, because it's contractors going off to work sites, heavy in the morning rush hour, heavy in the evening rush hour. But if that use changes and we have some retail uses where there's traffic all day long, then I think the abutters' concerns are well taken. So I'm suggesting that there is a retail use added to this site. It's a major modification. And then once a retail use is there, future changes to the retail use would be a minor modification. But you know, we want to revisit this as, for example, something as busy as the garden place across the street were to locate into this property in the future. So
Right, like a coffee shop goes in, or we want to see that before.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's a fairly low intensity use when you just have contractors going in and out twice a day. And office use, I don't think that's going to be very intense, but it would be a completely different situation if we had an active retail business here. So I hope everybody finds this condition acceptable. And Carolyn, chime in if it's wrong.
All
I
right.
like it, fine.
I don't have a problem with it.
All right. So let's move up, please.
The
And
third-
stop for a minute so we can look at 3 and 4.
Yeah. These 2 were also written by me, and the third is just to memorialize, I guess, what everybody agreed to at the last meeting, that the driveway on Brewster Road is now going to be located opposite the bank driveway. So I just want to make sure that's in there. this is another place where I might add another condition to say that the screening on is it the north side of the property, or the east, I forget.
It's-
Whatever side it is that's abutting the neighbors, that, the screening that's been proposed is actually put in and properly maintained.
I can wordsmith this.
Yeah,
Later,
and
if you want.
just say, yeah, abutting whatever side of the property that is, north, south, whatever, east, west, whatever it is, but, so that would be a new condition that I'd add in there.
Okay.
The condition that's now numbered 4, that would be numbered 5, that still is addressing my concern about whether, since we have non-conforming curb cuts, whether there's further relief from the zoning board that has to be obtained. I don't think that should be objectionable, but it's not our call to make whether the zoning board needs to weigh in on this one. Anyone? Bueller?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. All right. All right. So now what is 6? It needs to be rewritten. I poorly drafted this as I'm reading it again, but this is intended to. This was addressing my concern that I had that they be in complete coordination with the state on the redo of 3A. We sitting here tonight unable to predict when the state is going to actually construct the changes, but we do know they're far along in the process. They are going to create a dedicated turning lane. And as Clark has pointed out, they may have a very different opinion on where the curb cut on 3A should be. So,
Hey, Tom, I did an excerpt of this particular section that I emailed to Lauren. Lauren, could you just pull it up for a second so we could just take a look at it relative to this number 6?
Give me a moment.
Sure. I mean, there are 239 drawings in the drawing set, but I did a snip of just the entrance at Brewster Road on the front area of this site.
it was very hard to find that single drawing in that whole mess of stuff. On the
It's
state.
page 27, but hey. Sorry, 239. Did I say
I must
259?
have lost interest at page 26. So. Where are we looking?
Can you see that?
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, so you can see that there's sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk that's right up against the highway curb.
Yep.
And they're showing what looks like a slightly different curb configuration out to 3A and roadway width, as well as two curb cuts that I think one of these is redundant. So my suggestion, knowing that it's 75% and it's a few years off, my suggestion would be that that the applicant update their plan for permit to show the sidewalk and to show their curb cut different from what's shown here, and then get that information to MassDOT. Now, in terms of connecting the pedestrian from this to their site, I think maybe it should be an intent goal as a part of this section that they provide a pedestrian connection to their building, as opposed to making everybody walk in the drive aisle as a part of their project. Maybe that could be submitted to our planner for review and approval, and not necessarily to this board for another, like a modification. I think Lauren is more than well qualified to see if that whatever's provided to make that connection, pedestrian connection, whatever's proposed would be adequate. And in relation to this, and also as a part of number 6, I would recommend that the applicant, in their updating of their site plan for submission for building permit, that they change the label on Brewster Road from public to private.
Right, that was asked of last week. But thank you for reiterating it.
I did bring it up then, but I don't think that a requirement was made as a part of the condition, and it didn't show up in here in the list. So I'm reminding everybody. That's all right.
Thank you. So Lauren, do you want to go back now?
You know what
Lauren?
what I'm going to try to do, if I can just have a couple of, you guys can keep talking about the 2 conditions Carolyn added, but I'm just going to try to quickly rewrite this condition. Because it had misses when I looked at it again, and then just to kind of incorporate what Clark is saying here. So let me take a crack at that for the moment. All right.
Okay, so
Otherwise, go ahead and talk about the other 2.
So item number 7 indicates that 1 year, within a year of the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall submit an updated traffic assessment that was previously discussed. And if such time that there's an increase in the queuing time on Brewster Road above the projected queue that the applicant's original traffic report represented, that the applicant would come back before the planning board, who shall consider a modification to the site review decision to include construction of a dedicated right turn lane on Brewster Road. Is everyone in approval of that?
Sure.
All right, then we'll move on to number 8. This is one that I am particularly concerned about, and that relates to the question that the residents made about the runoff. And I would like to just note for people that the little shopping center next to this project across from Brewster Road actually has a driveway that is contributing to any sort of drainage. So it is actually a multi-business responsibility, right? The water's coming off both places. So this clause here is a condition that should the problem increase in severity as a result of the project that is currently being proposed, that the applicant again return to the planning board, and we will consider a modification to the site plan review decision to require installation of an additional catch basin or related infrastructure.
Amy, just as a relation to what's planned by the state, there are 3 catch basins shown on the front of this site, right around Brewster Road, as well as a catch basin across the street.
It makes
it seems like the drainage may be well taken care of, but that doesn't mean you don't have to put put number 8 in. But it may make sense to acknowledge that significant reworking of the drainage is being done as a part of the state's 3A project.
Okay, so that could just go in somewhere by saying, recognizing that it is anticipated that the state will do ... Nonetheless, should there be
that the state highway project does have drainage. But
right, but that's
within 1 year of issuance, it might not be the exact right time. So I would say, or in coordination with completed drainage for the work on 3A by the state.
right. So I am concerned that if this was, 3A doesn't happen quickly, and this ends up being a problem, then they're going to be struggling with that problem until 3A is actually being modified. So I would rather have it have a check.
Whatever you think makes sense is fine with
Yeah,
me.
I think that there should be a check, in 1 year.
Okay,
Okay, and
That
then
sounds good.
we can still have the language that the state's going to do the
Submit
adjustments.
drainage analysis, and by then presumably either the state work is done or they can weigh in more significantly than they did as a part of this process.
Right, that sounds like a good solution. Is that clear to you, Lauren?
Yes, I have the sense of what you'd like to say, so I
Okay.
will review with council a suggested rewording.
Okay, thank you.
I trust you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Just a minute, Mr. Colery.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you calling on me, Madam Chair?
I am, sir.
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking me to hold on just a minute. Thank you. And I did read over this earlier tonight when we received it. And in regards to condition 7, and I thought when Attorney Murray was speaking, she was, I'm sorry, going through and modifying documents like in real time. I just needed my brain to catch up to my words for a second there. So I apologize for going back to 7, but I thought that Attorney Murray suggested that we couldn't really ask an owner of an adjacent property to add a turn lane in on a street that they don't own, which is one of my thoughts and concerns. And then I know that there was these traffic studies were done. And given the fact that we're still in the middle of the pandemic, traffic may naturally increase. I don't know how they speculate what that might look like when, you know, our next stage of life resumes and people aren't working from home any longer and there's more traffic back out on the roads. And I think the bank next door might also see increase. I mean, I think generally those neighborhoods, those children that we speak of that are there now that may not be of age to drive may start to be on the road as well. So I'm just wondering how much of that really falls in and how can we do this study and look at the traffic? Are we talking about only the traffic that comes out of this particular property? Are we gonna, you know, they have the traffic counters that you could put across the driveways, or are we talking about the whole neighborhood's traffic? I think for everyone's clarification, if somebody could clarify that, I just don't see how you could hold a private owner responsible for the turn lane and the traffic study. It's going to increase. I mean, we all know that there'll be more cars on the road next year than there are this year. I mean, that's just what happens every year. But in addition to the pandemic and all the rest of the things that nature will bring us, so.
I think Paul raises a good point. I mean, generally, I didn't think that the right turn was going to be necessary for the added traffic of this particular site. You know, but this isn't what they're showing isn't changing the curb cuts. I mean, the state is designing the curb cuts. If any change, like a widening of the curb cuts for a turn would need to be done now. The state's not going to want to hear in a year after they complete this work that you want to add a turning lane. I mean, it won't happen. The state will just say no. So maybe that's something to discuss.
So can we modify this language? I think the point of number 7 is at this moment, given the set of circumstances that we live with, if after this project is completed, and let's say the state hasn't done anything on the road yet, and the project generates more traffic than was originally intended or expected, that there would be a additional traffic analysis done and an understanding of the responsibility for the increase in traffic or change in the use of the street area as a result of the project.
Yeah, but I don't think a change is going to happen once 3A gets rebuilt. It's, you know, it might as well be a moratorium. Nobody's going to want, the state's not going to allow a change to the curb cuts. So I guess I'm saying if there's a reason to do it, and I don't think there is, now would be the time to do it. And a related issue is who owns Brewster Road? Does everybody own to the middle of it? In which case, is the bank's property is what's being proposed to be changed to add the lane or widened? Or would it all come out of the setback from the pavement on the applicant side? I guess that, you know, there's, given that it's not a public road where you have a right of way width to do things in, everybody owns to the middle of the way, then they're not necessarily going to want to lose their grass if it's theirs.
And how far does the layout for 3A go into that intersection? You know, the first few feet where you think
Well,
Brewster is meeting
I
3A.
don't know if Lauren can pull that up. I mean, I've got it on my screen, but
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that part of where Brewster meets 3A might actually be the property of the state. And so to either put a catch basin or a turning lane involves permission from the state, which
that's right. Exactly.
I doubt
That's
very
my
much
point.
is going to happen.
Exactly. That was my point, and
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. But in
Yeah.
terms of the layout, if the bank owns to the middle of the layout and the applicant owns to the middle of the layout on his side, that he can't ask the bank to, oh, I'm gonna reduce your grass because the neighbors want it at this point, and the car queue time was exceeded the engineer's report.
Can
I just,
ask a
it
question?
seems like it's either now or never, and I'm for not doing the additional turn right now.
Okay, I think we have to make a choice here because we are getting into something that's becoming increasingly complex to just draft. The question is, should we've closed the hearing. We are now in the process of conditioning. Should we actually work on the conditioning and not try to do this on the screen, but actually we've got several questions here now. Right? We've got a lane question. We've got who owns the road. We've got questions of timing in terms of what the state's going to do. So trying to sort of fit this into a shoebox is getting to be increasingly complicated.
Well,
It's a
I
very
mean,
stupid question.
I still would,
Okay, wait a minute. Wait. Mr. Potter.
I apologize, but this may be a very, so the intended use of this building is it's not going to be a storefront, right?
Not at
it's not retail, not retail.
It's not retail.
It's office.
And this is, Mr. Amling's gonna be, so where I'm going with it is what Mr. Amling is intending to use it for. We can have a fairly decent idea of when the bulk of traffic is going to be coming in and out due to the nature of his business. Now, I know that can change if he sold it, right? But it's going to be primarily early in the morning, going to be primarily around 4 o'clock when people get off of work. And it's not going to be a big building. There's going to be a lot of different offices and customers coming in and out. So I do think traffic is, I'm a 3A is very dangerous, but the use of this building should be at least kept in the back of our minds, as opposed to this being, the Gulf Dunkin' Donut station, right?
All right, thank you. Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, and to that point, again, the other earlier condition would say that if the retail use comes in that is intense, like the Dunkin' Donuts, they have to come back and redo all this. But I will say to the abutters now and today and possibly then, is that I'm not sure we can compel this owner to build a right turn lane on someone else's property as part of site plan review. So,
Right.
The condition that we've written, I think, is the best we can probably do, or kick the can down the road. But again, we're operating with another, the bank's property, or that mall's property, whoever owns it, and we're dealing with the state with the intersection of two state highways. So I think there's a lot of complications that are really beyond our purview in site plan review.
All right, thank you. Ms. Murray?
If I could just add to that, Madam Chair, I took these two conditions from Attorney Sunny's proposal and put them into more workable format if the board is open to it. But I'm hearing two things from the board. One, I'm hearing that the board isn't really convinced that the proposed use of the site even warrants a right-hand turn, a dedicated right turn lane onto Brewster Road. And then there's the open question of what rights does the applicant even have in Brewster Road? Now, I know Attorney Seni has taken the position, or it seems to suggest from his opinion that the applicant, like others, owners of property along Brewster Road, all seem to own and have similar rights in Brewster Road. But we haven't actually seen anything in terms of a deed or any evidence that actually confirms that. So we could be spinning our wheels here on this condition, saying, well, depending upon what a future traffic assessment shows, we may require this, and you might be right. We might be going down a path where we're putting a condition together that the applicant doesn't have any rights to actually do. So
Thank you.
and then, of course, there is the whole other layer of what is the state going to do with respect to Route 3A. We know from other projects the state does, they do bring those curb cuts and those sidewalks. They do come into some portion of those intersecting roadways. So if the board is of a mind that the current use, as a trade contractor's office, is not going to generate such traffic that you think a dedicated right turn lane is even something that's necessary, then quite frankly, you could dispense with this condition entirely. Because as Mr. Callahan was proposing, if they come back with a retail use, we're going to have them reevaluate this as a major modification anyway. And it may very well be that there are a whole host of issues, including traffic, that might be generated by a retail use being added to the site.
All right, thank you, Ms.
But last
Murphy.
but not least, I just
sorry.
want to also say that even if you decide you want to keep the condition in, this doesn't compel the applicant to make any modifications to Brewster Road. It just means that if the traffic reports, the actual queuing time exceeds what's projected, they have to come back before the board. And essentially it's up to the board to decide what you want to do at that point. It is, I guess, kicking the proverbial can down the road, but it's not compelling that right turn lane to be constructed even in the future. It's up to the board to decide at that time how you want to handle it.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Callahan?
I put a revision to condition 6 in the chat that I hope Lauren can cut and paste, but
Yes, I have been.
I didn't know how else to get it to you. The other thing is, based on all this discussion, I think condition 7 is fine as it's written. I would approve it as it's written and just move. Let's get to a vote on this. It at least addresses the issue and recognition of the issue, and it is something that we're going to have to visit in the future, because we'd be speculating now on what the impact is.
Okay, so at this point, Ms. Lind, you have that item that Mr. Callahan just drafted listed as item 5. Is that correct?
The numbering has gotten, I've been trying to fix the
Completely
numbering.
off. Okay,
It's just
okay.
completely off. I will fix the numbering format, but this is the replacement to the cross out
Okay,
that he was looking to.
okay, so then let's go down to the next one.
Okay.
Because
do you want to read it?
Uh,
You might want to read it before you pass over.
It's also, everybody should remember, whenever somebody puts something into the chat, you have access to it so you can read it.
Was I correct that the curb cut on 3A was only meant to go in, not out? Or did I get it in reverse?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. We had a 50-50 chance of being correct.
All right, does anybody have comments on this item, or are we all right to go forward? It appears so. So let's move up back to the item, what is now numbered 6 on the screen. Okay, so this one here, are we going to scratch that one with regard to the dedicated right turn lane?
Council just said it does
We
no
should.
harm. It's not an absolute requirement. It just says if the numbers are such, then
They'll come back before us.
we can consider.
Okay.
We shall consider, but it's not an absolute requirement. So
Oh,
I think
okay,
there's
and-
enough flexibility.
Okay, so the same intent is for what is now considered number 7, that they would return to us if there is evidence of issues related to water that would need to require further deliberation.
Yep.
Okay.
Here's one more potentially that I'd like to discuss, and that is, should we put a sign on Brewster Road that says right turn only between 7 and 9 and 3 and 6, or is that just going to make everybody crazy?
That's a separate issue from the site plan review. I think, I don't know who controls putting a sign like that up, whether it's just the town or the state has to be involved in that, but I wouldn't have a problem suggesting that to whoever that decision maker is.
Well, something that always bugged me is on Pond Street where they have no turn on red signs.
Yep.
And all the people could go because nobody, if the light is red on Pond Street and people can go from, I'm sorry, if the light is red for 3A at Pond Street, but nobody is coming out from the pond actually side, people could be turning and going into the school, but instead they're stuck and they're queuing on 3A to get into where the high school and the junior high school are. Something that's related, it's the question that Tom raised is, how do we coordinate that with Mass DOT? If a right turn only from some hours, or with the selectmen who have jurisdiction over the roads.
If the selectmen have power over a sign on Brewster Road about left and right turns, then I have no problem asking them, but I'm just saying
Is it a good idea or not?
It's not something we can condition within this site plan review.
I
but it's
understand.
something-
I'm bringing it up before it's gone.
Yeah, no, I agree we should pursue it, but we have to determine who's the authority to put that sign up.
But the question is that a good idea to limit hours, or would it make everybody crazy and just like hate the project because there was no sign before and you could just go when you could?
I think you'd have a very hard time keeping people actually carrying out what the signs are indicating.
Yeah, I mean, up by the corner garage, the planning board had a condition that there was on 3A that there was no left turn. But a couple of years after that got completed, the sign disappeared. So sometimes people sneak through and sometimes suffer the consequences. I'm just talking about generally signage related to projects.
It's not a big, a sign is not a big deal. So if that's something that Clark, you feel like would help, I don't disagree.
I don't know. I mean, if I
Well,
lived
I think
there,
that's
might
something-
I don't see
Okay.
that as being something we need to deliberate
Okay,
over. If you,
Yeah, let
I
me
think
let me
that's
let
something
me
for
just
the-
ask let me ask Miss Murray. Do you happen to know, Miss Murray, who actually controls the placing of signage in a
I was going to
situation
give you
like
an
this?
answer to that. I've had my hand up for about 10 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Grady. Go ahead,
So who
please.
controls it would be the police department. They did it on Cushing Road when I requested stop signs. It wasn't a lot of heavy lifting there. So I do appreciate Clark's suggestion about it some sort of time and a right turn only. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think that will go a long way with the abutters. And my guess right now, educated somewhat, is that you would probably get it through the police. I'm not sure about the DOT because of the time constraints, but he is right about putting up that sign. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I just think that maybe that's an issue for the abutters to take up because it's going to impact them directly, whether they can make left turns or not at certain times of the day. But
It really would affect that, the people that live in the neighborhood more than the users of the applicant's project.
Correct.
If I can't can I get a recommendation here? Otherwise, I think we
No,
can,
It's
No, it
not,
would be a
it's
part
not
of-
something to go into this, it's not a
that's
condition.
that's
to be
what I
put into
think
this.
too.
It's a related project only.
All right. So then it's not going to go into the conditions.
Is there anything we've missed about the site plan to put in as a condition?
I don't have anything new from my notes.
Yeah, all right.
All right.
And
Are there
I'm
any
gonna make a
further?
motion, I'm gonna make a motion that's subject to Lauren's wordsmithing edits, that we vote to approve the site plan with the conditions and findings that have been drafted.
Second,
Right. Roll call vote. Mr. Potter,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
I just want to clarify, we're approving the conditions
we're,
put in by Mr. Sane and then rewritten by Ms. Murray,
Yeah, we're
and with the further
Yeah.
suggestions of the board.
we're
Then I'd vote
approving
for
the
it.
document Lauren has drafted with.
Then I would vote to
further-
approve. Aye.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Brewer,
aye.
Amy Glassmeyer. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, citizens of the neighborhood. Thank you, Ms. Murray and Ms. Lynn. That's really hard to do.
Good luck,
Mr.
guys.
Brewer? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Mr. Amalang. All right, I do want to, well, Mr. Morris wanted to know a question. If the public hearing is closed, is it appropriate for the public to be commenting on this chat? Please advise. We're not responding to the citizens' comments in terms of the chat. What we're doing is passing comments to each other using that chat as the vehicle for adding comments into the condition. Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a public service announcement. Cohasset football team won the Super Bowl.
Aw, that's so exciting.
Yay.
Big deal for the town. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right.
My daughter's there.
Good.
Okay, then let's move on to our next item. We're about 7:28. We're about 40 minutes over previous time that we expected, but that are not really 30 minutes over. So I want to reopen the public hearing for a site plan review filed by Split Rock Social. The subject property is 12 Parking Way. Let's begin by hearing from the applicant and the peer review and the peer reviewer.
Hello.
And could the applicant please indicate who is going to speak, in what order they're going to speak?
Aaron's just rejoining us as a panelist now.
All right, thank you.
Hi, sorry about that. So I'm Erin Herman, and got Ryan, my business, as well as Rick Grady, who will also be joining. Rick Grady is our engineer on this project, and he's going to kick it off with reviewing our site plan. We had some modifications done to it, and just to give you kind of an overview of how we're going to go through this, we did get all the responses from the peer review from the team that was done by the town, and they had about 10 points that they brought up. And we just very methodically went through each 10 points, and we'll present those to you after the site plan overview, just to make sure we cover off on everything. And that includes a separate study analysis done by BSC that I'll get into and let you guys kind of see more detail. So with that, I'll kick it off to Rick Grady with Grady Consulting, and he can kind of show the modified site plan.
Mr. Grady, your voice is currently garbled.
I wasn't speaking.
There's two
Richard
Mr. Grady's here.
That's right.
Richard Grady, we can't hear you. You are garbled, mangled by technology. If you're in.
How about now?
Now we can hear you.
There we go. Sorry about that. All right. So the primary thing that we've really been working on since the last meeting is coordination with the water and sewer department. A couple of minor items. The sewer department wanted us to connect directly into a manhole rather than into the line like we had it initially proposed. So that's not a problem. We've revised the plan to connect directly into a sewer manhole. The water service to the existing building at number 12 also actually comes in from the rear of the property as shown here. And the water department has asked us to connect to that existing service. So we've made that change that the water department had asked. There was a question from the fire department as far as a vehicle analysis for getting in through the two existing stone pillars. Those are located in these little square. It's right here and here. As the vehicle movement analysis here shows, they can get in through those existing pillars if the need arises.
They can. I thought the fire department said they couldn't. I thought the letter we got from the department said they had an issue with that.
Oh, I thought they were asking us to do it with the vehicle turning analysis to determine if they could get in there.
Oh, okay. I might have misread their opinion. Has anybody approached the owner about taking them down?
Yeah, so the initial feedback that we got from the fire chief was that the assumption was that one or two pillars would have to come down in order for the fire truck to get back there. And in order to confirm that, he requested a SWOT plan analysis. So that's what Rick is referring to. So we did that, and actually it does fit in between the two columns. So this is actually the first we're presenting it to you. We'll have to circle back with the fire chief and just let him know our findings. But judging by the SWOT analysis, it does appear that they can fit. So let's see.
It's clearly subject to their approval, but again, my question was, has anybody suggested to the owner maybe taking one or both pillars out?
Yeah, and he's amenable, or he can get out if we need to. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Perfect world, if they're gone, it's not an issue either way. So.
Yeah.
Quick question before we go any further. Has this updated plan been distributed? Because I don't see it on the site plan review for open applications. Is it the only one I have is the 4th of October. So is there a new plan, a new updated plan?
This is the newest plan, and we'll submit it.
Oh, you haven't. Oh, all right. Okay, you're
So
just going through it. You haven't submitted it yet.
Right. So this is, we just kind of hot off the press got these back from the feedback from last meeting, taking everything into consideration. So we'll submit that so everyone can review it in more detail.
So let's let Mr. Grady get through the description of the changes before we start taking them apart, okay? That's going to be the most efficient way to work. Continue, Mr. Grady.
Yeah, I believe I've actually covered all of the changes. They were really pretty minor. I did notice in Pat Brennan's review, he was questioning impervious surfaces. We're removing quite a bit of pavement on this site and using crushed stone around the picnic table areas. So there'll actually be a decrease in impervious coverage. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. We will turn to our peer review.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Pat Brennan with Amory Engineers. I reviewed the project for the board. I submitted a letter last Wednesday, I believe the 23rd. 10 comments as was mentioned earlier. My first comment, Rick kind of just hit on. I just asked that they specify what the proposed surfaces would be on the plan, so that we know where there is crushed stone, where there is asphalt or pavers or whatever type of surface there would be, because it really wasn't that clear. And one of my reasons for that, which Rick just covered, was that if there was additional impervious area, some stormwater mitigation would probably be required. I noted that the proposed container is about 12 feet off the rear property line. The minimum rear yard setback in this district is 15 feet. I'm not positive whether the container is classified as a structure and needs to meet that setback, but I wanted to raise that issue just in case it does. They have a proposed dumpster pad with an enclosure shown on the plan. I'm just asking them to provide some details or specifications for those. I just saw on the revised plan that Rick had on the screen where the drain lines were for the catch basin. Originally, they just showed a catch basin with no drain lines or anything. So it looks like my comment about showing how that catch basin works will be entered on that new plan that they're going to submit. They had some proposed rope barriers in a number of places on the plan. The ones along the north property line, which is the property to the left as you're looking at the plan, portions of it go onto the adjacent parcel. I did visit the site, and I think the reason why they're shown like that, there's a retaining wall along that property line, which probably, I'm not sure which property it is, and my guess is that they're proposing those rope barriers on top of that retaining wall. They have an emergency exit labeled in the northeast corner of the property near the dumpster, which I presume would lead pedestrians onto the adjacent property out back. So I'm just questioning whether there's an easement or agreements in place to allow for that pedestrians to go off the property onto the adjacent property. I'm suggesting a zoning table to be included on the plan that lists the existing and proposed dimension requirements, including the required parking calculation. In the bylaw, section 300-7.2N does not allow for removal of existing parking spaces in this district unless the special permit granting authority finds that the maintenance of said spaces is not necessary for public safety or that adequate provision for parking has otherwise been proposed. So I'm just asking, and I realize that this is in the village business district and there's parking directly out in front of this property. But I think just a little more detail on the parking plan should be provided. Again, I wasn't at the first hearing on this, so I'm not sure what was discussed previously. And the day that I visited this site at 7 a.m. Last week and noted that there's some cars parked in the rear parking lot, which it looked like they had been there all night. So I'm wondering if those are residents from the building behind this building. So I'm not sure what that situation is. So I'm just asking for some more information there. You know, whether those are lease spaces, if there's an agreement in place, what's going to happen with those spaces once, or where those people are going to park if this project moves forward. And then, because this will be open at night, I'm asking for a proposed lighting plan just so we make sure that they're not shining light on the abutting properties and so forth. So just asking for that information as well. So those were my comments / questions on the original plan. Like I said, it looks like a couple of them are being addressed on the revised plan that Rick had up on on the screen. But those are my comments for now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brennan. I do want the applicant to recognize that since we did not have the documentation to be able to work with this prior to the meeting, it makes it difficult for us to have an immediate reaction as a result of the ability not to be able to see things. So if we can consider this a conversation rather than something that has a hard stop, I think it's going to be a more realistic conversation.
Yeah, I kind of got that from as soon as he asked for the documentation to be posted. We get that. We tried really hard to get everything in line before tonight, but it was just such a tight turnaround with the holidays. But we do have, and thank you, Patrick, for laying that all out. We got the peer review on the 23rd. Jennifer sent it to us. And we do have basically a response to each of the points that I can kind of run through super quick. And yeah, just know that this is conversation based at this point, but hopefully it addresses each person or each concern, and then everything else will be kind of, an afterthought at that point. We can submit the paperwork and you guys can look at it afterwards. But is it okay if I go ahead?
Could we put the actual screen back up? Because I think that will be helpful. You're going to be speaking to the drawing,
Yeah.
so that will be really helpful.
Sorry, can I? Yeah, I'll share my screen. So we have a quick deck.
Okay, there we go.
I think Rick is sharing his screen currently.
Would you
Okay,
like
so
up, Aaron, or would you like me to
Yeah.
take it down?
Yeah, here.
just leave it there. That's right. So just a minute, let me ask Mr. Callahan, do you have something you want to say before she?
Yeah, before we go any further, I just, when our consultant was talking about special permits, it just, are we just dealing with site plan review, or should we supposed to have a special permit under Article 18 here?
Tom, you need to keep your face focused.
I'm
to your-
sorry, do we need,
Yeah.
are we also dealing with a special permit under Article 18 since this is in the village district? Because, our consultant just mentioned the word special permit with relation to the parking. Because on the agenda, this is just a site plan review, and I'm wondering if it's supposed to be both.
May I address that? Restaurants are allowed use in the village.
Yeah.
And so if it's allowed use, why would they need a special permit?
Is there a specific exclusion as a part of Article 18 for?
If you look at restaurants, it's silent all the way across. The only thing, as Tom mentioned before, was if they wanted to have mechanical entertainment, they would need a special permit. But they would be addressing any sort of entertainment through the select board and other means.
Are you saying in the table of uses, there's no requirement?
Correct.
It's yes,
It's blank
or it's blank for,
all the way. Yeah, it's blank.
it doesn't say yes or no. The use is an allowed use in the village?
So no other we've had other restaurants come into the village since 2007, and none of them have come for a special permit. So
Get it right, or, are you just saying that's just the way we've been doing it?
no, I'm just going by the table of, if you want to pull up the table of, I can't.
Yeah, no,
give
I
you-
just pulled it, I just pulled my copy up and yeah, it's totally blank for restaurants.
Right.
But
You
Jen, does
can't
that,
say yes or no under any zoning district.
but Jen, does that mean a new building, or does that mean all exist? Are you describing?
I'm talking about
reality?
use. I'm talking about use in the village.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's an old building or a new building. There is no special permit associated with it if it is a new building construction? That's a restaurant?
A new they're going to need a building permit. They don't need a special permit for the use, in my opinion. We can ask council.
The same issue though is a restaurant in a residential zone. It's blank for residence A too. Does that mean I can put a restaurant in front of my house? No, that's not the case. So was there some
Okay, so
error in the
let's
table of
ask-
uses?
let's ask council.
Thank you. No, I think the reason is because if you then look below restaurants, there's two for like subcategories.
You're right.
And it comes down to whether or not whether or not there's mechanical or live entertainment or no mechanical or live entertainment. And then based on that, if the restaurant does or does not have live entertainment, then you have how it's allowed by uses in the various districts. So the question did come up last time about this particular place and whether or not they were going to have live entertainment. But if they don't
My bad. I was having a
require live
senior moment.
entertainment, it's a
Okay.
use allowed. But if they are, they will need a special permit. We kind
I
of
see
need an answer
that.
from the applicant as to whether or not they intend to use or have any kind of live or mechanical entertainment.
Mechanical means music.
Oh, wait,
like
wait,
music,
yes.
Speaker.
Yes, okay, so wait, everybody gets a chance here. Mr. Grady?
I just have a question on this. This is something that the planning board's in place for, revitalization and looking at something. I don't understand why we're throwing up obstacle after obstacle. I think we should ask Ms. Herman what we require, what she needs, if we have to present it. But I think this is a hell of a project. I'm going to say that right now. We spend less time putting up condos than we do on a nice restaurant that's going to bring people into the town.
All
So
right,
I would
thank
really
you.
like to look at that instead.
We're
All
just
I'm
trying to
hearing
figure
is
out what the
roadblocks
ground
and
rules
questions.
are.
Just wait a minute, let's not get back into a back and forth. Thank you for that, Mr. Grady. What was being asked was a reasonable clarification as to whether or not and under what circumstances this is going to be designated a structure and what kind of a structure and what kind of a use. So all we were doing was clarifying what the possibilities were. And we have to do that before we make any determination. Ms.
I
Oram?
think I heard Jen's answer as well, Amy, and so
wait.
I'm just asking why all the roadblocks are being put up. That's a simple
I
question.
do think that section of the use is confusing, and I think that and when it came up last time, Carolyn and I talked about it. So and then I also met with John Hallen about it. So we did look into it, and so I probably should have sent you an email, but
Yeah, my apologies that I didn't remember we addressed it the last time, so I'm sorry I even brought it up.
no, and I had another point and it left my brain. So hopefully I can remember, but it was about structure. So the definition of structure is a combination of materials. So yes, this will kind of as a structure, so it should be moved to the 15 feet.
All right, thank you. So let's turn back to our applicant for clarification based on the items that the peer reviewer presented, and we are considering this a conversation. So that's why we are pursuing this direction. Go ahead, Ms. Herman.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll try to keep this short and sweet. I know we're running long on time, so we just took everyone's, or essentially every point that Patrick brought up and addressed it. So point one, the proposed services should be specified on the plan. Here's just a little sketch. It's very, very raw.
I'm not sure you're sharing, just a heads up.
Oh, I'm not sharing. Can you guys see my screen? I'm sorry. Hold on.
Okay, you were sharing and then we all came back together. So can we reshare the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, that would make it hard for me to show you what's going on. So I'm glad. All right. Can you all see?
We
Yeah,
can.
we got it now.
All right, great. Okay, so the point one about the proposed surfaces, this is a very rough drawing from our local firm that is going to do our landscaping. And as you can see, we're adding crushed stone all along the entire surface, and we'll be including, it should mitigate any stormwater runoff, essentially. Fairly simple. And if there are any questions or anything along the line, just feel free to jump in. Point two, we noted that the proposed container will be about 12 feet off the rear of the property line. The minimum rear setback is 15 feet. We will adhere to the 15-foot rule and move our container as needed. Point three, details and or specifications of the proposed dumpster pad and the enclosure should be included on the plan. So we just kind of blew up the plan a little bit. This is where the dumpster is going to be, right up here in the corner. We did have some side conversations with the Board of Health to talk about the different options of where the dumpster should be. And it was decided that this was probably the best option, and have a fenced enclosure. Point four, there's an existing catch basin in the rear parking lot. I won't beat a dead horse. Rick already covered off on that. This just shows the catch basin that has been adjusted. 0.5, there are proposed rope barriers shown on the plan. So that was just on our renderings. We don't intend to have rope barriers. There's an existing stone wall on the north of which will prevent open access. And we're also going to be putting some more greenery in there to make it a little bit more impervious. 0.6, there is a proposed emergency exit labeled near the northeast corner of the property. This would presumably lead pedestrians onto adjacent property. So we put this is the exit that is being referenced right here. And we did talk to Sean Cunning, who is the owner of this abutting business, and he agreed to allow us to utilize it as an emergency exit. 0.7, a zoning table, very blurry, but that was added to the updated site plan. And 0.8, so we could get into the weeds a little bit here. This is something that I'll submit along with our new site plan. We had a company called BSC do a study. They used the current MAPC plan and the current bylaws and parking allocations just to do a full study on the parking situation and make sure that we would have adequate parking during our peak hours, which and I just took a screen grab from the report because I thought this was the most impactful chart that was on there. As you can see, the available spaces during our hours, 12 to 7, and it goes down to 9 too, but are highlighted in green. And these are the total amount of spaces that were found from the MAPC plan, showing that there is adequate parking for our business. And the full plan goes into a lot of detail. So I'll send that to you, but this is the main takeaway, that there is adequate parking. I know that was a concern that was brought up last time. As far as the point that it will eliminate existing on-site parking spaces, and this kind of goes into the next point too, that there were 3 parking spots that were being parked in during the time that Patrick visited the site. So the lot is not, it's a private lot. It's not a public lot. There's no, actually there's signs that say no public parking. Those 3 cars are currently Seabird employees that have been parking there during the hours from about 6 to 2. And technically they're not allowed to be there. It's our landlord's land. And so it's technically not parking spaces anyway. There's no agreement in place. There's no lease or anything that would allow that parking. And in fact, the people that are in the current people that are in the building of 12 Parking Way can't park there either. They utilize the public parking lot as well. So I just wanted to touch on that point, and that covers off on the next point. I won't say it again, but the current people that were parking there were Seabird employees, and there's no authorized use of those spaces. I know that was a lot about the parking. I can just kind of wrap this up super quick, but point 10 was a proposed lighting plan that should be provided. I can also provide this to you all so you can see it in greater detail, but we had our engineer team that's developing our container bar map out a light plan, and this is it. Just showing that there's going to be no spotlights going into the abutters land. And then the point 11, this wasn't on the engineer's plan, but this did come up during last site plan review. So we just wanted to touch on it real quick. How will oyster shells be disposed of? And we're actually going to recycle them. We're working with a company to return them essentially to the ocean and be used to repopulate the oyster beds. So just something kind of cool we're going to do with the oyster shells. I just wanted to make sure you all knew that. And that wraps that up. So again, a lot I just threw at you all, but hopefully you can see we kind of took each point and tried to address it. And all the paperwork that we will submit will go into a little bit further detail. So hopefully that clarified some concerns.
All right, thank you. So we'll now turn to the planning board members, and Mr. Potter has his hands up.
This is, so with regards to the parking, and I can think it's a obvious thing to bring up. I work down in the village, so I know at certain times of day it is terrible. But this is just something that I think wouldn't be a bad policy position for the planning board to take in not holding that against potential new business ventures like what Aaron's proposing. And not taking that into too serious of a consideration, almost to force the town into making some decisions down the line for additional parking in the village. I think it's far more important to have some new businesses like the ones that she's proposing, and not make decisions based upon the availability of parking. Parking certainly is an issue down in the village at certain times, and it's something that the town should be thinking about on how to address. So I for one, work down there, know the issues, and don't think they're necessarily happening at the time that she's going to be in operation. They'll be in operation, but also would urge the board not to place too much weight on that in their decision process, because as a policy, it would be good to kind of get the town to start thinking about how they're going to handle this, especially if other businesses come into the area.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. We will be taking that issue up at the end of the night. So thank you. Mr. Brewer?
Yeah, at our last hearing, I had asked if it was possible to get access from the pedestrian walkway at adjacent Stagecoach Way, which is like brick, as a little bit nicer or maybe more direct way to access the site, especially from South Main Street, than going all the way around to the parking lot and then back in. Presumably people would do it anyway, you know, like the crosswalks at Harvard Yard. It's like the fastest route from one building to the other. But I wondered if you'd gotten any feedback from that adjacent property owner, and whether you could work something out where you could get access directly through some steps and a handrail.
Not yet, but we are hoping to do that. I think it's a great idea. I mean, to your point, it's the most natural kind of course that someone would take coming down Main to get into the lot. So currently we don't have any plans, but it would be something we want to do.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense to work with your adjacent owner and see if there are shared benefits to what you're doing and what they want to do. I mean, there's a couple of businesses along there that might benefit from more traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to meet up, but it was the week of the storm, and then we're planning on meeting up again. So
yeah, work on it, and next time we get together, then we can go through that detail.
All right. Other comments, Mr. Brewer?
No.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Grady?
Yeah, you know, I think that this is a really nice application. Aaron, it's a nice presentation. I hope the planning board will help you through this. And I am going to say this, we've already lost something similar because the needs of the one sort of outweighed the needs of the many, which is the town. So I'm going to reiterate myself by saying, I believe that the planning board is here to assist, help in something that's viable, something that brings revitalization instead of village full of condos, restaurants, something light, something airy, some place that people can have fun, people can walk to. So I'd like to see this at the next meeting moved right along and assisted so we don't lose viable opportunities like this to make the town the place that everybody purportedly wants it to be.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Grady. Mr. Callahan?
I have no comments. I'm generally favorably disposed to this and think, you know, we can move to conditioning very shortly, if not tonight, but probably not.
Well, I think because we didn't have the documentation before this meeting, we should be able to look at it and review it as we always do, if we receive documents without sufficient time. So thank you. Mr. Colery?
I have nothing to add, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I will, could I ask to have the map put, the actual site plan put up again?
Yeah. Just grab that for you. Can you see it?
Yes, so as we see here on Parking Way, you have the vehicle. I'm particularly interested in understanding what's the relationship between traffic and the structure that you're proposing. And so when you look down where it says Parking Way and you see this course, which would be, I presume, the fire truck, is that what you're simulating? Is the fire truck making that turn?
That's correct.
Yeah. Oh,
All right.
sorry. Go ahead, Rick. I'll let you lead this.
Okay, so what I see is a conflict here, and that is that the turning radius that the fire truck would need would, if there was a big SUV in any one of these parking spaces, you're going to be touching its rear end. So is this really a viable access point as you've got it constructed for the fire department?
Say
I
that?
think it is viable as long as the cars are within the spaces, obviously. And I think the issue may go away with the removal of the pillars, or at least one of the pillars as well.
Okay, so I think that for me personally, this is too close as a possible impediment for safety purposes. And so it would be worthwhile to first off, the fire chief should see this so that this is the expectation of how he or she would enter this. And the second is that I think having it actually diagrammed out with washable paint on the parking area would make it a lot clearer that it is functional, so that we're not going to find ourselves a little bit down the road and actually making it very difficult for us, an emergency vehicle, to get into this space.
Forgive me, I don't know the answer, but does the fire department overlook it or see these things anyway? Because I do remember on a couple other projects that they have come in and said that they need more room.
They do, Eric, and the issue is that we haven't had a chance for everybody to digest the diagram, including the fire department.
So they haven't seen
I
it.
have.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
No, I just wondered, as the fire department, they haven't seen it.
They haven't seen this new revised diagram. Yeah, so, I mean, we're just trying to follow normal practice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't know they didn't see it.
Okay, Clark Brewer.
I mean, this is a little bit different than like a building. I mean, a building, you fight the fire from outside the building. I would imagine if there's a fire that they would pull into the parking lot. They wouldn't pull into where the fire is. They would stop in the parking lot and bring their hoses to the like, say, flaming oysters, all of a sudden they get out of hand. They would bring the hoses and they would go the 60 feet to the oyster, the flaming oyster bed or the dumpster or whatever's on fire, and put out the fire that way rather than drive the truck into the middle of the fire.
We actually brought that up.
I could see like deliveries using this to get stuff as close as possible to where they're storing like beverages and materials for their customers. And it's possible like an ambulance might use this, but I don't really see the pump truck using this lane other than an extreme situation where they're fighting a fire on the other side or the back of these buildings that face onto South Main Street. That might make sense, but it really wouldn't be fighting a fire for this particular space. But the fire department likes to have as many options as possible.
That's right. So thank you.
I don't see the emergency, the bumper truck driving into the middle of the site.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And the fire chief will just certainly tell us exactly how this is going to work. The one thing I would also say is we haven't accounted for the delivery traffic that's going to have to be making this turn and also finding parking while it's delivering materials for the operation.
Well,
So
I just brought it up. So, in relation to that, I agree that's something to consider as a part of the application, but it's
Okay.
Historically
less of a turn
speaking, those
radius
trucks were a lot
than the
smaller
fire
and more
truck.
maneuverable.
okay, so that's really good. So Ms. Herman now has heard that, and I'm sure that she'll address it in the following documentation that we will receive as part of the continuation of this public hearing.
Yeah.
So I think that
Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Herman, are there other things that we can give you information on that could be helpful for you as you move to the next stage?
I think Ryan and we are willing to get whatever you need, whatever we need to do. We just need to know, what else do we need to get this over the finish line? And I think if we need clarity on, it sounds like the entertainment plan. I'm not sure if that we're super clear on that. And if that's something that's gonna be a snag, we want to make sure we address it. I think that would probably be the one remaining thing. Everything else, I feel like we've covered off on, unless there is something else that comes out of the woodworks. But like I said, let us know what we need to do. We're willing to do it. We want to get this thing going. And thank you for your support.
So I would say that our recommendation with regard to the music would be to work with the planner and with the building inspector to ensure whatever it is that you wish to do is actually going to be able to be done. And then whatever circumstances that either make it possible or make it having to be conditioned in some way would be really helpful for us to know.
Okay.
Mr. Callahan?
Nothing. You addressed it. Thank you.
All right. All right. So, Ms. Lind, we're going to continue this hearing. And can you give us a date and time for the next discussion? And let me say what we expect. We expect a final, we've discussed various things about the plan. I know you're going to work on that. We have discussed this need to have a conversation with the building inspector and the planning director regarding the use of the site, where music comes in and what's the role that's associated with that. Is there anything else, planning board members, that we feel we need in addition to more firm documents?
Yeah, I would just say that on the clarification with the music, and I just be careful with this because I think Jen was pretty clear about the fact that any music licenses goes in front of the select board. So I don't know that that's something that we need to muddy the waters with here. I don't even know if that's, according to Jen, something that really is we're making decisions on. So conditions, no conditions, more information, less information. It may just complicate things, but Jen,
Well, if they're going to bring any kind of music in, we have to do a special permit.
Yes.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So-
Exactly.
All right.
Right.
So I just quickly, if it's okay, I did speak to both, to the building inspector and if it was going to be if they wanted to constantly have music, live music, I believe they need a special permit, but it says mechanical and John and I read it as that would be a live band or karaoke. Recorded music has always been permitted by the select board. I was quite frankly surprised by this provision in the bylaw because we just granted a permit 2 years ago to BIA. So, I mean, they never had one. So I think we need to determine if, the definition of mechanical, and that's what John and I try to do. So we'll get you some more information on that. They could also get a 1-day license for a special occasion for entertainment, which is what we do in the village for the holiday stroll. If they decided, so Aaron and I have talked about that too, that if they ever did get live music, they could handle that through 1-day permitting. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I just think I'll have to talk to John some more, but I feel pretty confident that it could be done that way.
All right, so it's clear, I think, pretty much the issues that are at play here, and Jen's aware of it, Aaron's aware of it, we're aware of it. And I think that what we want to do is continue the hearing until a time and date, and we'll get new information. We'll have a chance to look over the diagram. We'll get the information from the fire department, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So Ms. Lind, I don't see Lauren.
I'm here. We just,
Oh.
there's too many screens up. I'm
Okay.
here. I'm gonna suggest for you a continuation time and date of January 1st, 2022 at 6:30 PM. I'm sorry, not January 1st, January 5th.
Okay,
So moved.
Second,
all right. Mr. Potter,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan.
Aye.
Mr. Colery. I think he said yes.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brewer.
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. All right, we will see you on the 5th of January, and the more packed the information is and the well outlined it is with a front cover that tells us everything that's there, the easier it's going to be for us to do our job.
Yes, yep, that will be the plan.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, so we're now going to reopen the public hearing for a site plan review modification for properties 380, 390, and 400 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. And I'm going to recuse myself as the chair. In the last meeting where we discussed this topic, I was asked several times by colleagues on the board why the project was proceeding, given that it had a stop work order. I commented inappropriately in the context of the discussion, and so I'm going to recuse myself for the remainder of the discussion of this project. And Mr. Callahan will take over, and then I'll come back at the end of the evening. I'm changing into an observer.
okay. Thank you, Amy. All right, we'll call this continued hearing to order. Let me first see where we're going to go and make the most efficient use of our time. Our consultant has done a very extensive report because there's so many changes that have been made from the 2010 site plan, and that was so long ago. We asked the consultant to treat this as if it was a new application and go over it very thoroughly, and he's given us a very thorough response. I guess I want to ask the applicant, Jeff, did you guys get to see this? This is dated November 22nd.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, members of the board, Jeff DeLisi. Yeah, we were provided a copy, I believe, sometime a day or two prior to the Thanksgiving holiday. And so
Right.
just to
Well, in light of that, I'm just suggesting possibly, what I just want to get your pleasure and the board's pleasure is possibly reversing the order of the way we do things. But does your group, Jeff, have any new material to present to us other than a response to the Weston and Sampson report?
no.
Okay, so then I'm going to suggest, given the substance and the length of it, that we have Weston and Sampson present their findings in an executive summary. I don't want you to go over it in excruciating detail, but all the highlights, please. And then we'll hear from the applicant as to what responses you might have, and then open it up to the public. If that's okay with everybody, I just thought that might be the better way to proceed.
Sounds good to me.
You good with that, Jeff?
Yeah, I noticed that Eric's here. He was not here at the last hearing, and I didn't know if you wanted me to give you a quick summary as to how this is all developed and so forth.
Okay. Well,
But my concern, Tom, is that we have a permit which we've been operating under for a couple of years. And we've sought to make a modification to basically capture changes since that approval years ago.
Mhm.
And I just, I understand that in connection with an engineering review, there are going to be issues raised. I was hoping to kind of keep them to the changes and not, go beyond into a new site plan.
look, this is how we've asked them to look at it. Again, and tonight to have them proceed for, if Eric would like to benefit from a quick summary, that's fine, but I think the major new material being presented tonight is from Weston and Sampson, so my thought was to start with that and then have you respond to it.
I actually was, I believe I was at that part of the meeting, my video, I just did not have video at the house that night, but I was only out at the end of the meeting, like the last half hour, so I believe I'm up to date. In any event, I did go back. And watch it.
I don't want to go through it again anyway,
Yeah,
so that's
all right.
fine, but the word just.
And Jeff, as to your timing concerns, my understanding is that under site plan review, we have a deadline to act, and that deadline is that we have to close this by our next meeting on December 15th. And that is the target here, and that is the intent.
Okay.
But, we did get a substantial review here. I think we should go through it, allow you to respond to it. One thing on permitting, though, that our consultant did point out, because of the added housing component, you need a special permit from the zoning board. Now, that'll clearly be a condition of our site plan modification, but, the sooner you apply for that, obviously, the better.
That was applied for, and a copy of the special permit decision issued by the ZBA was provided to the planning board with my application in 2018. So I'm happy to, I'll get that over to Lauren.
All right.
We have a copy of that.
But so there's no modifications to the housing, other than that some are gonna be online initially and then some will be coming online later. That's the only real change. That wouldn't really be a ZBA modification to phase the units, right?
Right.
Lauren has a question or a comment.
Just a comment. We all have the copy of the 2018 ZBA decision. That's not looking to modify this. That is in existence. There's a couple of items raised that Jen Orm can speak to at some point when it's appropriate, that I think the chairman of the ZBA had brought up in reviewing the material that's for the planning board right now. But those are kind of material that are existing already, and we do have those on record. So I just wanted to note.
All right,
that,
Jen, yeah, okay, thank you. Jen, why don't you, when we get to the board comment period, we'll hope you can update us on that. So, all right, without further ado.
And Tom, just briefly, whenever you think it's appropriate, there have been some new developments vis-a-vis permitting involving the site and the sewer infrastructure specifically. So if you want the update for that now or later, just let me know, but I do think it's relevant to the conversation.
All right, well, why don't we do that when you have the floor after? Let's get
Sure.
Jim Reardon. And Jim, again, it's rather long, it's rather lengthy. Hit the highlights of this, if you would. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan and planning board members. I'll share my screen and go through presentation. And as you requested, I'll keep this as brief as possible, try and hit the highlights. So this is obviously the site plan review, peer review for 390 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. We covered several areas. They include prior conditions, bylaw compliance, site plan layout, wetlands, traffic and circulation, and environmental site review. We looked at materials that were provided between October 21 and November 19 of this year. A list of those materials is provided in our November 22nd peer review memo. We'd previously done a completeness review that was provided on October 29th, and we were asked also to take a look at the trench detail review related to wastewater, and that review was provided on November 2nd. So this is a follow-up to those two reviews. Compliance with prior conditions. So this is referring to the conditions of approval from November 1, 2010, when the planning board issued its initial approval. We noted one condition that appeared to potentially have some compliance issues, and that has to do with increased impervious surface. There's a 4.5% increase in the impervious surface, being the difference between 58.4 now and 53.9 previously. This is still below the 60% threshold. So this is something that the board may want to consider waiving. Bylaw compliance. So we looked at two basic elements, or we looked at multiple elements of bylaw compliance, but flagged two of them. One has to do with zoning requirements and the other one with lighting. Zoning requirements, as was noted earlier by Mr. Callahan, due to the housing aspect of this, that there is a need. I'm sorry, back up here a second. Proposed use in the HB district requires special use permit, and today we have not received that. Then lighting. So the zoning ordinance requires lights and sources of illumination shall be shielded from direct view at normal eye level. And no information was provided on that. So we would request that that's provided for review. Site plan review layout. So there were a number of comments here. I'll just kind of go through them quickly. The plan cover sheet drawing doesn't properly index all the sheets that are in the plan set. That's sort of a minor issue, but one that should be corrected. Sheet C3.0. So we would request that there are additional spot grades provided so that we can ensure that the handicap parking does not have slopes exceeding 2%. Sheet C4.1. The bedding layer sand is not compliant with the recommended practices. Sheet 4.6. So this is really a number of consistency issues. Pipe connections are different on sheet C3.0 and 4.6 and EX1. So those should be clarified and made consistent. Typical subsurface infiltration system layout and the underground infiltration chamber cross section had some consistency issues. Excuse me. Elevations conflict with the top of the chamber shown in the cross section, and then subsurface infiltration system details don't match the volume calculations in the pond 3P of the proposed conditions of the HydroCAD model. Then on sheet EX1.1, there's conflicting representation of the three pipe connection from the leaching chamber with representation of a single 12-inch pipe on C3.0. In Appendix E, the geotechnical report, there's some inconsistency in soil types, and that could affect modeling. So representation of the modeling was a little different than that report. Stormwater report checklist was not stamped or signed. That should be stamped by PE and signed. No access ports, so it is not clear how the infiltration system will get inspected or maintained. Copies of three-party testing should be provided to verify the 80% TSS removal claim for the hydrodynamic separators at the site. For the wetlands, we took a look at the northern buffer and the southern buffer. Those both look to be okay. So, so it appears to us that this will not present a threat to wetlands. There were a number of traffic and circulation concerns. So parking concerns, there were a number of locations where the parking spaces and the aisle widths weren't dimensioned, and several locations where parking space dimensions that were provided did not appear to meet minimum requirements. Angled parking spaces behind the building are significantly below the minimum standards. So we would request that those are improved. Some dimensions of the ADA spaces don't meet the minimum requirements also. Several locations where there are aisle width scales scale less than the minimum requirement. And there appears to be insufficient room for the fire truck when there's a tractor trailer truck that might be parked within the two eastern loading zones. There should be a review of the parking space count to address any of the discrepancies noted above. So as those things are adjusted, the spaces should be recounted. Pavement markings, plans don't clearly indicate when the existing exit aisle pavement markings are to be repainted. The ADA requirements, there appear to be 2 ADA ramps along the front of the building, but that will not provide a clear 3-foot wide level parking path around the proposed ramp. Fire access plan. So the site plan information doesn't match the most current site plans dated March 24th, 2021. So that should be addressed. Verify how the truck will be able to circumnavigate around Stop and Shop. That appeared to be pretty tight, particularly if there's a tractor trailer there. The applicant should provide a turning template for school bus entering and exiting the site. And then in the TIA, the Transportation Impact Assessment, recommendations in that impact assessment for consideration as formal conditions, we'd recommend the following 3. Provides the pavement markings on Sohair Street, providing written confirmation that the Transportation Division Management measures that are outlined will be implemented, and provide written documentation that the applicant has had recent discussions with MassDOT about updating the traffic signal timing at the site entrance. There are a few issues related to environmental site review because there are historic releases on adjacent properties that could be migrating onto the site. So these are related to chlorinated VOCs. Apparently there were some dry cleaning operations nearby. Potential applicable state regulations and federal regulations that should be considered. This has to do with soil removal, making sure that it's tracked properly, et cetera, and obviously in compliance with standards. And then groundwater management concerns. So the applicant should advise if they're planning to do any dewatering at the site, and if so, how that groundwater will get managed. And that is sort of a 10,000-foot level review of the issues we identified.
No, I appreciate in the interest of time tonight that you could shorten that up, but there's still a lot of detail in there. So Jeff, I will turn it over to you and your team. I don't know how much of this you're prepared to respond to in substance, but and then also if you want to bring up your new information about other permits, feel free to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to let Andrew Shagnon of Vertex respond to Weston and Sampson. I think we're going to have a short response tonight. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to request that you allow us to have a conversation with Weston and Sampson to kind of address these points. I think that we're probably able to address all of them. From the standpoint of just kind of new information, a couple of things. I think that the board is aware we have a sewer connection at the property. We've reached an agreement with the sewer commissioners on that. And the site plan that was approved in 2018 obviously did not contemplate that, and has a very large septic system and high retaining wall holding it in place. One of the issues that had come up at the last meeting was there was a discussion, and you guys ultimately kind of ceded to the building inspector to make a determination as to whether we can do certain work on the property before the cold weather sets in. The building inspector recently issued a permit to allow us to do that work, and we have commenced it today. He waited to issue that permit until Mass DEP approved all of the site work on the site in relation to the sewer infrastructure, which it has done since the last meeting as well. So those are two significant pieces of information that the board did not have at the prior meeting. I also, before turning it over to Vertex, just wanted to briefly address a little bit of confusion that I sensed from the last meeting on this question of a stop work order. What had occurred was that your plan in 2018 approved of a location to put a 12,000 gallon tank and two 5,000 gallon tanks in the ground in order to essentially capture and pump wastewater to the septic system. As it became evident that we were going to get our sewer connection, we had initiated discussions with Mass DEP as to a temporary solution for sewer. And it was indicated to us that Mass DEP wanted a 10,000 gallon tank for certain sewer infrastructure purposes. We ordered the tank, and when it was delivered, we placed it into the ground in the same location as was previously approved. So a smaller tank in the same location. And Mr. Hallen indicated that it was necessary to have a trench permit for that. And he asked us, and we agreed to not backfill that area and not dig any new trenches to Stop and Shop system until we received the proper approvals from Mass DEP, which we have now done. So there was never actually a stop work order, though I think one would have been issued if we did not have that conversation with Mr. Hallen. But I just wanted to clarify that to the board. And with that, I'm going to ask Andrew.
I appreciate that, Jeff. It's just, from the board's perspective, we were just caught a little off guard because I don't think all of us were aware that a stop work order had been issued. But I appreciate your explanation, and we can move on from that.
Okay. So if Andrew would like to address any issues with respect to the engineering, I'd appreciate that.
Jeff, thank you. Andrew Shagnon with the Vertex Companies, licensed engineer in the state of Massachusetts, representing the applicant. As was mentioned, we really just received these comments, just a little bit before the Thanksgiving vacation time. We have been addressing them. We don't have a lot of substantial information that we want to present tonight. We think that it would actually probably not be the best use of everybody's time. We do think that everything in the comments, either the information to answer the questions already exists in our submittal, or that we can, respond to them satisfactorily. What we'd like to ask with the planning board's permission, we would like to have a conversation with the consultant. We have already started to prepare a draft response to all these. We'd like to discuss those responses with the consultant, only just to see if there's any place where we maybe have any kind of disagreement. We then will finish a formal response to those comments with any plan changes or anything that would be needed, and get those back to you before the submission deadline for the next public hearing, with the hopes of being able to wrap this up at that hearing.
Clark, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Andrew just said, typically on a project like this, that's a little bit bigger and more complex, and it has a lot of civil engineering intensive. In the past, what we've recommended that our consultant and the applicant's consultant work directly to resolve as many, if not all, issues relative to the peer review, to the peer review satisfaction. Sometimes there's an occasional thing that you just want to get both opinions on. But I think that Andrew's suggestion is an excellent one.
All right, let me just talk about that. I'm all in favor of everybody talking behind the scenes. That sounds to me as a good idea. I am a little concerned that we are running into the 75-day limit under the site plan review bylaw. That's why the 15th is our last possible hearing within that window. We can all agree to extend that window. And that might be the thing to do, but otherwise, all of this material and consultation between the two sides of engineers, it's all got to happen, and I would say before Monday the 13th, because in fairness to the board, we have to have material by Monday the 13th at the very latest.
Tom, you want to just ask the applicant if we can extend that and get
Yeah,
it in
so I
writing.
mean, so I'm all in favor of everybody sitting down and working out this engineering stuff, because it does seem to be a lot of technical engineering things. But you know, the applicant, I would ask the applicant to cooperate with us and don't put a gun to our head on a deadline. On the 15th, we have some other things that we need to do. We're going to have a full agenda, I assume, Lauren, and you know, we are going to have to do a lot of conditions on this. I mean, the alternative, if we're pushed to doing the 15th, is we go down the Weston and Sampson letter and everything they think needs to be done becomes a condition. You know, and perfectly willing to do that. But so I guess, yes, I'm putting it to the applicant if you'll be cooperative on extending the date. And unless I hear any other objection from members of the board, the engineers from both sides can meet, and that's all good. Eric, do you have something to add there, or? No, I'm sorry. Oh, it's a white hand. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so Jeff, let me see what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, well, ultimately, you guys have the hammer, which if I didn't want to extend, you certainly would have the purview to just deny, and I certainly wouldn't want that. So but of course, we're going to be flexible with the board on any extension request. I'm just asking, in consultation, in my discussions with our engineers earlier today, they thought that they would be prepared to have a substantive conversation as early as the beginning of next week. And so I'm wondering if it makes sense to still target the 15th, and if we're not able, then we just continue at that juncture, or if that's something that's uncomfortable.
Well, I'd rather deal with that now. If we're going to do that, then, you know, Lauren had her hand up, but she mentioned that January 5th was our next meeting after that. I don't know, Lauren, if there's something you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add, looking at timeline, we've done these meetings in the past with the applicant and engineer. I'm happy to coordinate that, but I do want Jan Hallen to be able to sit in on that, as he's the enforcement officer for the board. John's actually out and he's not going to be back until Tuesday. So at which point we wouldn't be able to meet until Tuesday. Then you have to prepare the applicant, their response. Weston and Sampson has to review it, get it to the board. It's really going to be way too tight to get it realistically for the 15th. So I would suggest, if the applicant was willing, that we would, you know, we would have you request an extension to January 5th, and then we would have sufficient time to have all of this in place to wrap this up on the 5th.
I think that's sensible. We'll do that, and I'll submit a formal letter, you know, codifying that for you, Lauren, and then
Thank you.
we're still going to move forward and try to do this quickly from our perspective.
We'll make our motion to continue on the basis of that agreement. Before we stop tonight, I'm going to give the board the opportunity to weigh in on anything they want to, but I'd like to hear from Jen first about when I read Weston and Sampson's letter, I didn't realize that the special permit from the ZBA had been obtained, and Carolyn may have to weigh on this about whether that's still applicable, or do they need to get a fresh one, and or where that whole thing stands with ZBA.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I did read Weston and Sampson's letter, and I did talk with the chair of the zoning board, and I just wanted to address the zoning side of things, which we, you know, as we know, we don't condition any of this, but just sort of reach out to Jeff in that this permit was issued in 2018, and by acting on the building, and also the DHCD paperwork has already been filed. So it is a valid permit. I would like to talk, where we're having conversations in the next few weeks between engineers, that we also do the same, Jeff, with John Hallen, myself, and possibly Woody, just to make sure that all the provisions are still, you know, for example, in this permit, it talks about an on-site septic system. We also need to address under the watershed protection district, make sure with the relocation of the building and the flows, that everything is still meeting the provisions of the decision. And most importantly is the parking, as you saw to make sure that all of the parking requirements are conforming. Otherwise, it would have to go back to the zoning board for a modification. So I just want to put that on the table that we should also address that so that everything's working in parallel.
Yeah,
I think that's
my other concern, Jeff and Carolyn, is 12.4E about the special permit having a 2-year lifespan. Is that an issue for us here?
No, I think that applies in the circumstance where you have to substantially commence construction within that time frame.
Right.
Okay, all right. You agree, Carolyn?
I like you, Tom. I didn't realize, I haven't seen the 2018 special permit either, so I'd like to actually look at that. But usually there is language about whether or not substantial construction has begun. But the other thing is, with COVID, there were some extensions of permits that existed as of March of 2020. So it's also possible that, even if the 2-year period might have lapsed sometime last year, that because of the COVID extensions, that the permit might have been given new life as well. So I'd actually like to look at it before I could respond to that.
And to Jeff and to Donald, I'm trying to make sure we can move this along because there's, at least in my opinion, and I think others, there's a substantial interest in seeing these housing units get online as soon as possible. So we're not trying to obstruct, but I don't want to get hung up on a missing permit. Clark, you're up.
Yeah, when we asked our peer reviewer, I think last time, to check what was approved in 2018 and 2010 to let us know what was different in what has been submitted generally. The problem that I have just intuitively is Vertex put together a project narrative saying there's parking changes, there's drainage changes, and there's sewer changes, but nobody identified the fact that because the sewer changed and you aren't going to have the septic system in the back, that whole area of the retaining wall. I mean, Jeff did mention the retaining wall's gone, but we don't actually see a regrading plan or how that space is used. I think I brought it up before. We wanted it to be set up so that if there's dads and kids living in that building or moms, they can throw a football around or toss a frisbee, play croquet or whatever. If there's like is it all grass or is it going to be like overgrown brush, or like we haven't seen that space in its reconfigured form and how it's going to be used and how it's going to be programmed. So for our next and hopefully last hearing, I'd like to see that on the engineering plans. What is it? I know it doesn't have a retaining wall anymore, and that's good. But how can it be? Is it a useful space?
I think it goes without saying that if we're trying to modify something from the past, we have to know exactly what it is we're modifying and address all those points. So,
well, yes, and this is just an example that sewer, parking, drainage. Okay, yeah, but what about this whole multi-use space that was a part of the plan? It's completely reconfigured now, and we haven't seen it. So that, to your point, Tom.
And
I think Donald,
engineers take note of that. Engineers take note of all of Clark's points and address them as well. So,
if the board wants an answer, I think Donald has an answer now. Clark, I just wanted to also, one of the things that I happen to notice was that Donald has offered to put an extra parking space or two for handicap accessibility over by the handicap ramp right next to the building. And we're going to show that on the plan as well. I had forgotten to mention that previously.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
all right. I mean, Donald, if you have something to add before I go to the rest of the board, that's quick. Go right on this point. Go right ahead. But I'll get back to you, Clark.
Go
ahead, Don.
Yeah, the whole area has been regraded and hydroseed, and there's approximately 1.5 acres of lawn and area that the residents can use. And we'll be probably putting picnic tables and stuff back there for the residents to use. So the board is welcome at any time to come and look at it. I can send them photographs that I took after we graded it and hydroseeded it. If I could send those to the board, they'll be able to see it unless they want to come on site and see it.
If you can, for my benefit, if you could do photos, that would be better. I'm not sure I'll get out there. All right, thank you. Clark, you done, or do you got another?
Well, I got a
comment?
couple, just a couple of, these are relatively minor, but just a couple other points. I think that light fixture cuts, probably, I don't know about photometrics, but you just want to make light fixture cuts and with dark sky technology to the extent that our consultant and we haven't seen them. I asked this last time, I think, a spec on the paint. You know, there's like super cheap paint that lasts 6 months for the parking. What is that, and will it last? Especially the handicap accessible route. That stuff gets a lot of traffic over it, and it would be good to know that what's specified for that. I mean, I think on the 2018 plans it says white paint. Is it specified to handle the traffic to last, so that it doesn't become as big a maintenance item? I had a question about the trigger on Sawyer Street. That's in and activated, right? The
what?
the light trigger that we required back in 2010.
Yeah,
on Sawyer Street.
so
How's that working?
MassDOT was not particularly interested in activating that scenario. And just to refresh the board's recollection, I think that it was condition F of the 2018 special permit that required the applicant to make a good faith effort at approaching MassDOT to try and coordinate signalization at the top of Sawyer Street so that it turned a specific color when the light in front of Stop and Shop turned a specific color. And at the time after the hearing, Donald did have some communication with MassDOT on that, and nothing came of it. They didn't particularly show much interest. However, now what is happening is that we are coordinating with MassDOT relatively extensively because the sewer extension is coming from the south, a couple hundred yards south of the property within the layout of the Mass Highway. And as a result, we have to coordinate with MassDOT. We've instructed, after receiving Weston and Sampson's report, we've instructed our engineers who are in constant communication with MassDOT to raise this issue more formally once again, kind of revive it, and we'll report back to you on that.
Thank you.
That's
Okay, so it's not completely dead.
issue. Yeah, that's an important issue in particular in light of, I believe there was a recent car accident or motorcycle accident at that intersection, which revived this conversation again. I know Donald's had some communications with police and fire on that as well.
Yeah, well, people on Sawyer Street, they get desperate, and then you see it every day.
Tough. Yeah, it's tough.
So can we get something in writing on how the affordable and market rate units are going to be phased? You know, if it's like 3 and 8, or how that's going to be phased, and what the probable schedule is. You know, I think that everybody's going to want to be able to see that. And then finally, it seems like Jim Reardon raised the point about dimensioning parking spots, that I think it makes sense to have the parking spots dimensioned on the engineer's plan, and as an update, you know, just to this may fall into the satisfaction of our reviewing engineer, our peer reviewers, just to make sure that we've got enough room and we're not losing some of the spaces. I know there's an excess, and those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark. Eric, are you there on screen? You're next on my screen, so. You got anything you'd like to add?
Is that for
Suffer
me?
from ADD a little bit, Tom. I get very fidgety, so I pop
No,
up.
that's all right. I do too. I'm up
My
and
ears
down
are
all night.
always, I can chew gum and I can do a couple things at the same time. I am listening. Yes, nothing further to add. No.
Okay, thank you. Paul Caleri, you are, because of Amy's recusal, you're a decision maker on this one. So you have any comments or questions you want answered?
No, I have nothing further to add. Looking forward to getting the units online. We certainly need the affordable housing units, so
That we
looking
do.
forward to moving this process forward.
Yep, that we do. All right, Paul Grady?
No, not at this time. I have nothing to add.
Okay, thanks. Lauren and Jen, anything else from staff perspective to add? You're muted.
You'd think by now I'd be used to it. I have nothing further to add. I'm happy to prepare to coordinate the meeting with the engineers of the applicant and our peer review, along with John, the week of 12/7, and coordinate the receipt of the ZBA decision from 2018 to those who have not yet viewed it.
And
Jen,
if I could just, I know that we were talking before, and just to confirm, Jeff, that you were saying that you were okay with me trying to coordinate that meeting regarding the zoning side.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So just reach out and I'm yours.
Okay, sounds good.
Mhm.
Carolyn, anything we have to be on alert for from your perspective? No, are you waving?
I think I can read her palms.
Your signal's all broken up. We can't hear you, Carolyn. All right, we can't hear you, so.
She was still muted.
There we
Carolyn,
go.
now you're unmuted.
There we go. No, I don't have anything to add. I just want to make sure that we also make sure we follow up with Attorney DeLisi on the extension agreement. That's all.
Right, okay. I don't see anybody in the audience, abutters or anything, so what I will do here is, yes, Clark.
No, I was just gonna make a motion to continue.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna throw out a couple of motions. Now, number one would be to the board approve that our staff and our consultants be allowed to meet with their consultants sometime prior to the January 5th meeting, and whatever they're gonna get to us. I realize we have the holidays, but that Monday is what, January 3? That would be the absolute outside deadline. So I'll make that motion first, that be allowed to happen. And second, anyone? Thank you. Roll call, Clark,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Paul Caleri,
Aye.
Paul Grady. Paul Grady. All right, Tom Callahan, aye. It passes. This next motion I would make is that we continue this hearing to Wednesday, January 5th at 6:30. In addition, that with the agreement of the applicant, that the deadline under section 312.6A is at least at this point in time extended a week beyond that, so it gives us
Excuse me.
time to write a decision.
Excuse me, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I thought Attorney DeLisi asked for our next hearing date, if they could possibly get that. Is the 5th of January okay with you guys?
Yeah, no, I thought we all discussed that earlier, that everybody's in agreement that the 15th will be impossible to
Okay, all
get
right,
all the materials together.
all right then. Never mind.
Correct, Jeff, if I'm speaking out of school, but to give us time to actually write the decision and get it signed, the deadline that's under 312.6A should really be extended a week beyond the hearing of the 5th. So we'll meet on the 5th. We'll have the 12th to issue a decision. If we need to extend further, we'll make that decision on the 5th.
So your motion to continue is to January 5th at 6:30. I'll second that.
Correct, with the extension of the deadline to issue a decision to January 12th. All right. Does anybody, you second that? All right.
Did.
Roll call, Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Eric,
Potter, aye.
Paul Cleary,
Paul Cleary, aye.
Paul Grady. All right, Tom Callahan, aye. All right, so tough with the holidays, but everybody try to get together as soon as you can, get us materials as soon as you can, and we'll see you on the 5th of January.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, Amy, where are you? You're back.
I'm back now.
All right, turning back over to Amy, I guess we have other business minutes and stuff to attend to.
All right, thank you for this. We do have minutes. We do have an update from our planning board, or our planning director. And just a minute here, I have a list.
I just want to say, we all have to be very, very conscious of that 75-day deadline on the site plan review. So,
Amy.
Yes.
I'd just like to make a quick little statement. So obviously at the end of last meeting, I was not available to be there. And I did listen to the meeting, and I, you know, we're all here together to work as a team. And for me, when I listened to the end of that meeting, it was a low point as a member of the planning board. I'm not saying that to anyone in particular. I'm just pointing that out. And I think it's important that we all realize that we're all here together as a team at the end of the day, and that we're all working towards a common goal. And that's to make class a better place. I think we live in a world right now that you pick sides, and it does not allow for discussion always, and people dig their heels in. And if we don't all agree, then that becomes a problem. And I would urge this board to not go in that direction, and to welcome dissent and welcome discussion respectively, and to be respectful of one another, regardless of that person's position or a board member's thoughts or opinions of things, because we want to be a board that is looked on by the town citizens as one that is working together cohesively and in the best interest of the citizens. And if you look at the last half hour of that meeting, in my opinion, it wasn't our best day. So, you know, I don't think that we all have to always agree. In fact, disagreement sometimes is a good thing, because it allows people to think and maybe change their minds and positions on things. And if that's stifled, or if a person or people or members feel like they are going to be condemned, or you know, it's not going to be received well, then what happens at the end of the day is discussion doesn't happen anymore. And that's not good for any of us. That's not good for the town, and that's not good for the board. And again, this is just a general statement after watching what I watched. And I think very highly of everyone on the board, and of all your positions and all your opinions. And I think it's just important that we remain aware that we all have different positions and opinions, and come at this from different areas of expertise, professional backgrounds, and also personal, you know, beliefs and interests on things. And regardless of whether or not I agree with anyone about a particular bylaw, decision, whatever it may be, I think it's just a very, very important thing for this board to work towards becoming a collective unit again, to keep in mind that we all do not have to agree, but that doesn't mean that the board is not doing the right thing on the whole, or that the board is not making best efforts. And you know, I just had to get that off my chest, because it's been sitting with me for the last couple of weeks. And, I want to be proud of being a planning board member. I've been with the board for 5, 6, 7 years now. I've learned a ton from many different people. And I haven't always agreed. And it's not always agreeing that's been some of the times that I've learned the most being on this board, because I have changed my mind and my decision. And if I wasn't allowed to hear other people's opinions or have those discussions, then a lot of my opinions wouldn't have changed. So, I just would hope that moving forward, we can keep that in mind, with especially with all that's to come before us with the zoning bylaw changes, and take that as a kind of a lesson to, or a reminder that, we are a team at the end of the day, and our collective goal here is to improve Cohasset, and to work together in doing that, even if we always don't agree.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to comment? All right. Well, thank you, Eric. So what we have
I'm
to
sorry,
do.
Amy, I said Amy, I apologize. I was on mute. I said I'd second that.
Okay.
Agreed.
That's-
And I'll third it.
Yeah.
So we're in-
I was going for my button, but I couldn't get to it either. I appreciate Eric's comments, and I agree as well.
All right, so we're in agreement. That's wonderful to hear. So now we still have a little bit more business to do. We have actually 3 items. One is we have some minutes. I hope everybody had a chance to read them. And Lauren, would you tell us which, or actually Jen, you usually do this. Would you tell us which minutes we have to approve?
Certainly. These are for July 28th, September 22nd, and October 13th.
Motion to approve.
All right. Thank you. I would like you, Jen, to convey to Angela that she did a really nice job on those minutes. They were really detailed and they were very comprehensive. So it makes it a great record for us to work with.
I will tell her, and she's heard you because she's here.
Oh, good. Okay, there you go, Angela. I was trying to figure out how I get a chance to tell you. The second thing is that we have.
Can we vote on the motion?
Yes.
I made a motion to approve
And
already.
I seconded it, so.
All right, thank you. Eric Potter.
Aye.
Paul Grady,
Aye.
Paul Caleri,
Aye.
Tom Callahan,
Aye.
Clark Brewer,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you. So the next thing we have is to hear planning director updates.
Hi, I'm gonna leave my camera off because my internet connection is telling me it's unstable, and I think it's better if I leave my camera off at this point.
Well, it's all right
so-
if you don't, Lauren.
I'm here though. I'll be quick. I just wanted to give you an update on what's upcoming on our agenda. Our next meeting on December 15th. We do have quite a bit of material to cover. We'll start with the update about the RFQ as we outlined earlier with Katie Dugan earlier tonight. We will then go into, we have, it's a double application for a site at 26 Lambert's Lane. It's an approval not required. Along with a common driveway application. The applicant had reached out to Planning, Permits and Inspection Department to discuss with us. They met with John specifically and sort of worked through some of the technical specifics there. And they left that meeting thinking that they were sort of putting their best foot forward now to head on to Planning Board. So we will hear from them, and then we will be queued up to begin open our public hearing on the amendments to the existing common driveway updates, which will include, the new access regulations that we're introducing. And then after that public hearing, we will then have the return of the Jerusalem Road Estate subdivision from circa 1998 to 1999. They had been back before us right before the pandemic, I would say. Actually, it was in, I want to say 2019. They had come, the very short summary of this project is that they had received subdivision approval back in, circa 98, 99. The subdivision was never recorded at the Registry of Deeds within the 6 months that it's supposed to have been. So it's essentially invalid at this point. What they're looking to do is to have the board sign off on a certificate that would allow them to then proceed with recording as is. And so I'll prepare you with all of the sort of background information that we had last time. They came around with the same request in 2019. The board at the time, had a lot of questions. So it was not ever conclusively decided how to act on that. And then after the pandemic, it kind of dropped off for a bit. So they're coming back to us now. It's a new law firm, I'll note, from the applicant, but they're asking for the same request. So we'll take that up. And then that will conclude our business for 12:15. And then our following meeting is, I'm sorry, I'll pause.
Yeah, I remember this 2019 thing, even though I wasn't on this board, but remember it coming up. If we had legal counsel weigh in on the time, could we retrieve that opinion and share it with Carolyn and with the board?
Yes, and we've already started to disseminate some of that information. Some of the questions I will note that just sort of we didn't finalize what the opinion was, so we'll pick up where we left off, and there's a series of items that we'll review with Carolyn so that we're prepared for this on the 15th.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on the 12:15 agenda? No. Okay, I'm going to move on then quickly.
How much time are we allocating to the regulation discussion?
I was planning about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, I would give it an hour.
Okay, I'll plan that. And then our next meeting then we'll pick up in 2022, which feels really weird to say. We'll have our first meeting on January 5th, 2022. And we've already got a couple of things queued up now. You heard the continuations that happened tonight. So we'll resume 12 Parking Way and 390 CJC Highway, those site plan reviews. We will also, I believe we're queued up to get a review of the final revised site plan for the Quasit Harbor Inn site project. That was one of the conditions that they would return to the board with their final revised site plan. So we're sort of just circling back on that. And then the other thing, more notably, that we'll prepared to get information on I know we're in receipt of at least one. I'm anticipating a second one, but there's two subdivisions that are coming in under the guise of preliminary subdivisions. They're interested in sort of pursuing the zoning freeze route. So one is Cedar Lane and one is Black Horse Lane. So I will distribute all of that information as soon as it's available to me, and we'll have more to come on that. But I just wanted you to know that those are coming down the pipeline.
Okay.
And then I don't have anything else queued up into beyond then on January. I know that we have other things that are sort of like percolating that we will see in the early part of 2022, but at this point, nothing to report on right now.
All right, thank you, Lauren. One item that's not anticipated in advance is directly related to Eric's comment about thinking about parking at a larger level. So this issue of parking has come up in a number of different places and under a number of different circumstances. And we really haven't stepped back and thought about parking, for example, in the village in a holistic way. So I'm thinking that it would be valuable to us as planners to actually think about, what is happening to the village, what can we anticipate, and how can we prepare the town for a better parking system than we currently have. Because we are clearly at different points in time lacking access. And we know that merchants are concerned. We know that residents are concerned. And so I would like to see us have a conversation about some of the issues that are arising with parking and what maybe might be some solutions that we could start thinking about, but at least talk about it in terms of planning. And this would be taking place in the context of the time that we've set aside to have discussions about material and non-administrative matters.
Sounds great. Constitution Park across the street from me. Pave it.
Okay. Lauren, will you please look through the next month or so and see a time that we could actually have a discussion? And I think that the preparation might include having Jason be a part of that conversation, and I don't know exactly who else ought to be a part of that conversation, but I think that you can help us build that out so that it's something which we're all informed about, how it works, where it doesn't work, and what are the things that we can do.
Okay, absolutely. I'm happy to coordinate and plan for that. I will say that parking in the village has been a hot topic that I've heard about, particularly even in the public engagement through the Elm Street Corridor project that we've been going through in recent months. One of the main concerns when we met with the stakeholders on the sort of village end was really relative to parking. And we know that this is an overarching problem. It's been brought up, many a time. So it really is timely. And particularly as the master plan sort of set out their goals and visioning, we know it's been a long-term goal. It's been identified in our master plan. It is something that I think is really important to a lot of people. And in terms of our economic development goals for the village, it's really timely. So I will be happy to coordinate that. I'm actually thinking, even as I just mentioned, I don't have anything queued up for our second January meeting right now. So I'd like to say we dedicate the first portion of that meeting to do some discussion that's not, agenda, that's not administrative or application related, and we can take it up then.
Okay, and Tom Callahan.
Well, and related to it, I mean, the bylaw, the parking bylaw is separate from the issue of the public spaces we have available in the village of the harbor. But if anyone on this board has a strong opinion about the current parking bylaw, as part of the zoning working group's rewrite, I'd love to get some input on it, because can't focus on every part of the bylaw. And right now there is no discussions of making any changes to the parking bylaw in the wind. So if anybody has any input or suggestions, we just made the change when we did with Situate Hill about how we measure square footage to calculate the number of spaces. But if anybody has any substantive thoughts about how many spaces we require in different parts of town, commercial districts, residential districts, I'd appreciate, some help and some input on that. So.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Jen, do you think it would be worthwhile having Woody at that discussion? You and Woody?
Sure, I think so.
Yeah,
We've talked about it for a lot of different, that everybody's reliant upon the 500 foot, even though it falls under the planning board, but it does need to be amended, I think.
Okay, so that'll be additional individuals who will attend while we have that conversation. So does anybody else have a topic that they'd like to throw on the table that could fall within the context of the issues that we're concerned about?
I'll make a motion to close.
All right, there we go. Can I get a second on that? And did somebody say second?
Second,
Okay.
you got
Eric,
3 seconds.
I didn't hear a single one of you. Okay, Eric Potter, Paul Grady,
Already, aye.
Paul Caleri,
Paul Caleri, aye.
Tom Callahan, Clark Brewer, Amy
Aye.
Blackmeyer. Good night. Thank you,
Good night,
staff,
everybody.
and Carolyn Murray for your help. See you in 2 weeks.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, everyone. I'm waving. You just can't see me.